They waited like wolves for the fat sheep to leave their safe nest. Standing at the forest edge, Thorstein sneered toward Friend City. Plantagenet lords, your timing is perfect. Your wealth and blood will cover my losses. By the next day, all preparations were complete. Supplies were loaded, and Count Rochefort's promised goods were scheduled for delivery in 5 days. The recruited artisans were ready, many bringing their families to start anew in the north. I found myself with unexpected free time at the post house. Just as I considered visiting Charlotte to strengthen our bond, the system notification chimed. Daily task updated. Task: go on a date with Charlotte Rochefort. Incomplete. A perfect task. My hesitation vanished. It was an ordered date, so I had to go. I groomed myself and headed to her home. The maid Martha opened the door, but the situation inside was not what I expected. Charlotte was in the living room, assisted by 2 maids, strapping on a set of practice plate armor. She beamed at me. "Carl, you're just in time. I need a sparring partner to consolidate my recent advancement." Seeing her eager expression, I felt a terrible premonition. Half an hour later, at the inner city training ground, I stood there, feeling utterly defeated, encased in a heavy, cumbersome suit of training plate armor. If not for the past month of grueling reconstruction and military life, I would have collapsed under the weight of this gear instantly. Opposite me, Charlotte was already prepared, wielding a blunt training sword and warming up with a combative glint in her eyes. "Ready, Carl? Let's see your Schmidt family swordsmanship." Before I could respond, she lunged, her blade aimed straight at my chest. I scrambled to block. The impact sent a jolt of numbness through my arms, forcing me to stumble backward in a clumsy retreat. What followed was a one-sided lesson. Charlotte danced around me, her footwork light and her strikes precise. She unleashed a relentless barrage of slashes, thrusts, and feints. I was nothing more than a human punching bag. Despite my improved reflexes and strength, I lacked formal training and combat experience, leaving me helpless against a talented knight like her. I could only rely on instinct to dodge or block, repeatedly getting tripped or struck until I crashed into the sandy training ground with a loud clang. "Get up. Keep your guard steady. Watch my feints. Don't just use brute force." Charlotte's instructions fell on deaf ears as I struggled to keep up. After being struck in the chest for the umpteenth time and falling flat on my back, I lay there gasping for air, my bones aching, staring at the sky through my visor. Charlotte approached, tapped my chest plate, and removed her helmet. Her golden hair was damp with sweat, but her breathing remained steady. She was far from her limit. Looking down at me, she sighed. "How disappointing, Carl. You're a Schmidt. Your ancestors built this legacy on martial prowess. Have you really let it all go to waste?" I struggled to sit up and removed my own helmet, revealing my sweat-drenched, disheveled face. I gasped for air and replied with a bitter smile. "If I had those talents, the family wouldn't have sent me to the northern frontier to die, would they?" Charlotte paused, then laughed, her frustration dissipating. She reached out and pulled me to my feet. "Fair point," she mused, studying me. "But you're lucky, clever, and you always seem to find people to help you." She alluded to people like Old Moore and Brendan as we sat by the sidelines to drink water and chat. Our conversation drifted from swordsmanship to the situation in Conford and gossip from the royal capital. Despite the brutal start, the atmosphere grew warmer through our shared sweat and honesty. System notification, date with Charlotte Rochefort completed. Reward, intelligence received. A Solen warband hiding in the Black Forest plans to ambush the noble Cyril von Eichberg's party at Icewater Creek tomorrow. I froze, my mind reeling from the sudden influx of information. Charlotte poked my shoulder curiously. "Hey, Carl, did I hit you too hard? You've gone completely blank." I snapped back to reality, suppressing my urgency, and shook my head. "No, it's nothing." I took a breath and asked casually, "Charlotte, how many men are you taking for tomorrow's escort mission?" She looked at me suspiciously. "Why ask? It's just a simple escort. I'm taking 30 cavalrymen to ensure those pampered nobles don't kill each other before they reach their destination. I'm not their nanny. Once they're clear of Friend City, I'm heading back." My heart sank. 30 men would be slaughtered by a prepared Solen warband. I spoke with intense gravity. "Charlotte, please, take more men. As many elite cavalry as you can. She frowned, confused. Why? Are you actually trying to fulfill your promise to my father? Those spoiled brats won't even thank you. It's not for them. I interrupted urgently. I just have a terrible premonition. Unable to reveal my source, I insisted. Even if the Solonians shouldn't be here, I feel like we might encounter a unit that hasn't retreated yet. Charlotte laughed, reaching out to touch my forehead. Are you hallucinating? Solonians aren't goblins. They don't just appear out of nowhere. Before she could finish, I grabbed her hand. My palm was sweaty from training, but my grip was firm and desperate. She was startled and tried to pull away, but I held on tight. I looked into her blue eyes, my expression earnest. Charlotte, I know this sounds insane, but I swear on my honor, my intuition has never been this strong. I can't explain it, but please, trust me. Take more men. If I'm wrong, I'll accept any punishment you deem fit. But if I'm right, I didn't finish, but the gravity in my eyes said enough. Charlotte seemed flustered by my sudden intensity and the heat of my hand on hers. She had never seen me this serious. My urgency felt undeniably genuine. The air grew thick. Her cheeks flushed, and her heart raced. She avoided my gaze but didn't pull her hand away, weighing my words. Finally, she sighed and met my eyes. Fine. I can't say no to you when you're like this. I'll tell my father I need to ensure the success of the expansion project and take 2 more squads of elite cavalry. 90 men should be enough to handle any small Solen unit. A weight lifted from my chest as I realized I was still gripping her hand. I let go, smiling awkwardly. Thank you, Charlotte. Truly, thank you for trusting me. She pulled her hand back, rubbing her wrist and feigning annoyance. Don't get too happy. If tomorrow is peaceful, you'll regret this. Despite her threats, her flushed face and flickering eyes betrayed her agitation. My desperate concern and the way I held her hand. It was a strange, yet not unpleasant, sensation. This guy, he's truly bizarre, she thought. Back at the post house, I locked myself in my room and summoned Roland and 2 veteran soldiers. They were seasoned men who had survived countless border skirmishes under Richter. I spread out the crude map provided by the post house. I quickly pointed to Icewater Creek. It was the only path to the southwest peninsula, a narrow river flanked by dense forest. Look here, I said, pointing. If I were a Solonian, I'd ambush them here while they cross. The formation would be stretched thin, and they'd be easy prey. Roland stared at the map, his face grim. My lord, are you saying the Solonians are truly planning an ambush at Icewater Creek? How could you possibly? I interrupted Roland. This is just a tactical hypothesis. Assume you have 90 elite cavalry and the enemy is lurking nearby. What would you do? Roland pondered. The enemy is hidden. We are exposed. The Icewater Creek is long and forested. The Solonians could strike anywhere. I would scatter the cavalry into small teams to scout the banks, ensuring our flanks are secure and allowing for a quick reaction. That was the orthodox approach, but I shook my head. My perspective was colder. Cyril's 1,000-man force would stretch into a vulnerable, elongated snake. Scattering 90 cavalry would be like sprinkling pepper, useless against a premeditated Solonian ambush. Furthermore, I refused to let these elite cavalrymen face the brunt of a Solonian assault and suffer unnecessary losses. They were Count Rockefort's elite, only deployed because of Charlotte. These troops were strategic assets, not to be wasted protecting a waste like Cyril. More importantly, I stared at the southwest peninsula on the map. Cyril von Eichberg had chosen the tip of the peninsula for his territory. It was fertile with natural harbors, a place of immense trade potential. If he developed it, his family's wealth would make him a powerful force in the north, far surpassing me. In the north, only one person can rise, and that is me. Only one territory can be the center, Conford. The southwest peninsula must remain chaotic or fall under my control. A plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone formed in my mind. I looked at Roland and the 2 veterans. My plan is different. We abandon all forward scouting. What? They gasped. We keep the 90 cavalry concentrated, trailing far behind Cyril's force, hidden from Solonian scouts. We wait for the Solonians to attack. My eyes chilled. We wait until Cyril's force is crossing the river, thrown into total chaos, and the Solonians have fully committed and scattered to loot. I slammed my hand onto the map. That is when we strike. We charge not to save the rout, but to crush the disorganized Solonians. Kill as many as possible, then withdraw immediately. Silence filled the room. Roland and the veterans understood the cold subtext. We weren't protecting Cyril. We were using his force as bait to lure the Solonians out before delivering a lethal blow. Cyril's survival was irrelevant. The plan was risky and ruthless. Roland took a breath. My lord, isn't that too? He couldn't say cruel. I stared coldly. Remember, we are warriors of Conford. Our priority is our home. These cavalry are our future. They cannot be wasted on a meaningless rescue. Cyril is a sacrifice. We must ensure his death yields the greatest result while weakening a potential rival. I softened my tone. Of course, if possible, we will gather his remnants and supplies afterward. Resources are vital. The veterans, hardened by war, accepted this cold realism more easily than Roland. One said, a risky plan, but it minimizes our cost while removing a threat. It requires perfect timing. The other added, if Cyril collapses too fast or the Solonians are too strong, we could be in danger. Then we must be decisive. I commanded, prepare the horses and gear. We act tomorrow. Yes, my lord. They left. I stood alone before the map, eyes fixed on the southwest peninsula. Don't blame me, Cyril. Blame this cruel world and your poor choice of land. Night fell, and Charlotte arrived at the governor's mansion. She rarely visited this cold, grand building. It reminded her of her mother. Her mother was the count's legitimate wife, hence his deep affection for Charlotte. But the count and his wife were estranged due to a deep political rift. Before the count became governor of the north, the royal capital demanded he leave his eldest son behind. It was a standard political hostage situation to prevent treason. Her mother refused to accept this. She argued that a mistress's bastard could be the hostage, not her precious son. They quarreled. The mother stayed in the capital with her son, while the father came to the frozen north alone. Charlotte understood her father's sacrifice as a statesman. Yet, she sympathized with her mother and brother, feeling alienated from her father. This conflict made her visits to the mansion complex. Her father's doting love only added to her internal contradiction. She pushed aside these thoughts and entered his office. The count was reviewing supply lists with a scribe. Seeing her, his stern face softened, and he dismissed the scribe. Charlotte? A rare guest. What brings you here so late? He asked gently. Charlotte approached the desk. Father, about tomorrow's escort. 30 cavalry isn't enough. I want to request 2 more teams to ensure safety. The count's smile faded into suspicion. He knew his daughter. She wouldn't care about those pampered nobles. Oh, why the sudden caution? That's not like you. Usually, you'd be looking for an excuse to beat them up. Charlotte felt guilty, her eyes darting away. It's the pioneering decree. It concerns the North's stability. The force is large, so more protection is better. The count watched her in silence, his gaze piercing. He knew his daughter's clumsy lies. He had already realized the truth. He knew of Karl's recent visits to her. Little happened in France City without his knowledge. The count spoke. It was Karl von Schmidt who sent you, wasn't it? Charlotte jumped, her face flushing with panic. She knew she couldn't hide it. She slumped. He suggested it, but not for himself. He thinks. He thinks what? The count pressed, his voice calm but heavy with pressure. Charlotte looked at her father, relaying my warning. I sensed a grave danger near Blackwater Creek and feared encountering Solonians who had failed to retreat. I insisted she bring reinforcements. She added, with a hint of protectiveness, that I was willing to accept any punishment if my intuition proved wrong, but begged her to trust me this once. The count tapped his desk in silence, his expression unreadable. I have always been an enigma. My survival in Conford and discovery of the mine suggested either uncanny luck or foresight. As a veteran of the northern frontier, the count knew that a soldier's intuition often surpassed formal reconnaissance. He sighed, observing his daughter's mix of worry and inexplicable faith in me. He realized her insistence wasn't just affection. She truly believed in my premonition. Nonsense, he barked. War cannot be waged on whims. If every officer relied on gut feelings, the army would collapse. Charlotte's heart sank, fearing a refusal. The count softened his tone. However, caution is never a vice. The north is unpredictable, and the Solonians are anything but conventional. He relented. For your sake, and the sake of this caution, I will assign you 2 elite cavalry squads. 90 men should suffice for any accidents. Charlotte beamed. Thank you, father. Go, he said. Tell Carl I've noted his premonition. I hope he's right. Ensure your safety above all else. If things go wrong, retreat. Charlotte nodded and departed. The Count's expression darkened. He didn't fully trust premonitions, but he trusted his daughter's judgment and my potential for special luck. The cost of extra troops was a small price to pay if it meant surviving a Solonian encounter. He wondered if I truly possessed foresight or had access to secret intelligence. Regardless, the troops were deployed. The outcome would be decided tomorrow. At dawn, the area outside France City's north gate was a chaotic, noisy mess. Noble scions, unaccustomed to early hours, sat atop ornate horses, yawning incessantly. Lorenzo Visconti and Jasper Waters complained about the cold and the early start. Cyril von Eichberg's massive, luxurious carriage stood out. Cyril was still dead to the world after a night of debauchery. His servants had literally carried him into the carriage wrapped in a blanket. The guards and slaves were in even worse shape. Different families' retinues were jumbled together, soldiers lounging in disarray, slaves sitting listlessly like cattle. Wagons blocked the path, with men bickering over space. It was a rowdy country market, not an army marching to the frontier. My transport team and I were relegated to the very rear. The Count wanted me to act as a rearguard. Given my unit's discipline, I would have outpaced this rabble in hours, so I accepted the position. Roland pointed toward the city. Sir, look, the Count actually sent 90 cavalrymen. Count Rochefort rode out, his face stoic. Charlotte followed, looking sharp in her polished breastplate, her golden hair tied back. Behind her, 90 elite cavalrymen marched in perfect, lethal formation. They made the surrounding rabble look pathetic. Charlotte spotted me at the rear. She tilted her chin, her blue eyes gloating. See? I did it. I felt a surge of relief and gratitude, saluting her and the Count. My tactical plans had relied entirely on securing these 90 men. The Count surveyed the chaos with visible disgust. He bellowed, "Silence!" His authority instantly quelled the noise. He issued sharp, final orders. He established the marching order, emphasized discipline, and appointed Charlotte as the temporary commander with full authority. The north is no place for leisure. Open the gates. As the gates opened, the chaos erupted again. Families scrambled to be first, as if it mattered. The gate became a bottleneck of wagons, soldiers, and slaves. The Count's guards and Charlotte's cavalry had to use sword hilts and horses to force a semblance of order. I watched the farce from the back. Only after the others had cleared did I lead my disciplined unit through. I saluted the Count as I passed. He nodded, his eyes holding a complex expectation. Once clear, Charlotte trotted to my side. Well, I delivered, didn't I? 90 of the best. Happy now. I smiled at her triumphant expression. Thank you, Charlotte. I couldn't have done this without you. She beamed. Small matter. Let's see if your premonition holds up. The quality of the Count's cavalry was immediately apparent. Each man had 2 horses, 1 heavy charger for combat and 1 sturdy mount for travel. This preserved the charger's stamina for the moment of impact. Charlotte deployed them in groups of 3, creating a wide, effective reconnaissance net across our front and flanks. Charlotte's scouts were disciplined, reporting terrain and conditions regularly. Her cavalry acted as a precise early warning system, contrasting sharply with the chaotic main force ahead. I watched with envy. If I had such elite cavalry, Cranford's mobility would improve drastically. We marched slowly all day. By sunset, the massive silhouette of France City was still visible. We had covered less than 10 kilometers. This turtle-like pace was infuriating. If not for my promise to the Count and my plan to use the Solonians to weaken Cyril, I would have pushed my transport team forward at full speed. Cranford had over 300 mouths to feed. Every day of delay was a drain on our survival. I wanted to fly back immediately. Instead, I had to suppress my anxiety and follow this tourist group. The young nobles finally began setting up camp with much noise. The process was chaotic. Slaves were whipped for attempting escape, and soldiers from different families brawled over camp spots. I ignored the mess, forming a defensive circle with my wagons and setting sentries to maintain discipline. Charlotte, equally unwilling to mix with the rabble, set up her camp adjacent to mine. She then visited me. She teased, "My scouts saw no goblins all day. Is your premonition failing? Ready for my punishment?" I smiled helplessly at the distant, crooked campfires. "We're still near France City. The Solonians wouldn't ambush us here. Let's wait 2 more days." Charlotte sighed, kicking a stone. "I never expected them to be this slow. We won't reach our destination until winter is half over." We shared a wry look. Despite my words, my nerves remained taut. The Solonians were like vipers, waiting patiently for the perfect moment. We were walking step by step into their hunting ground. The night was noisy, but our camp remained alert. For the next 3 days, the column crawled northward. Nobles frequently peeled off to head toward their own territories. The main force grew thinner and slightly more orderly as the chaotic elements departed. Soon, only Cyril von Eichberg's massive, disorganized group remained, with my transport and Charlotte's cavalry trailing behind. I kept a deliberate distance from Cyril, which annoyed Charlotte. "Enough, Carl," she said, impatient. "We're near the Southwest Peninsula, and it's been quiet. Your premonition is wrong. Let's split up." I shook my head firm. "One last stretch. Once we cross Icewater Creek safely, I'll admit defeat and head back to Cranford." Charlotte found my stubbornness both annoying and amusing. She agreed, "Fine. To Icewater Creek. If you make more excuses after that, don't blame me for turning on you." "Agreed," I said, adding a request. "After the next pass, pull your scouts back and concentrate them around my transport." She laughed, mocking, "Scared? Afraid the Solonians will jump out and steal your grain?" I admitted it plainly. "Yes. This grain is Cranford's lifeblood. Your elite cavalry is better used guarding the convoy than scouting." Though she thought me overly cautious, my earnest expression convinced her. She figured it was fine since we were parting ways soon anyway. "Fine. Have it your way," she told her lieutenant. "Recall all scouts. Consolidate the force to guard the transport's flanks and rear." The scouts returned, and her powerful cavalry gathered around my wagons. A weight lifted from my chest. I felt a sharp, cold resolve. Everything was ready. Roland and my veterans, who had participated in my tactical simulations, finally realized the truth. My previous hypothetical scenario was actually a cold, calculated plan. They realized we were letting Cyril's group die to reap the benefits. They were shaken but remained silent, awaiting my command. I caught their gaze. I gave a slight, cold nod. They understood. Prepare for battle. In Cyril von Eichberg's luxurious carriage, time felt frozen. It was a mobile palace. It featured thick fur rugs, polished wood walls, and built-in cabinets. A brass heater kept the northern cold at bay. The air was heavy with expensive perfume and alcohol. Cyril lounged on velvet cushions, embracing a woman. He had just finished lunch and was preparing to nap. Perhaps bored by the journey or curious about the northern light, he finally decided to look outside. He pushed the woman away and called out, "Hans. Steward Hans." Hans opened the door slightly. "Yes, young master." "Where are we?" "Where are Lorenzo and Jasper? Why is it so quiet?" Cyril yawned. "We are in the hills of the Southwest Peninsula, near Icewater Creek. The others turned off toward their lands 2 days ago," Hans replied. "Oh, who's left?" Cyril asked, bored. "Only our family's force, young master," Hans added, "and Charlotte Rockefort's cavalry, still trailing behind." "Who?" Cyril sat bolt upright, his sleepiness vanishing. "Charlotte Rockefort? The Count's daughter? She's still following us." "Yes, young master. Her cavalry is trailing us at a distance," my steward confirmed. A surge of narcissism hit me. Charlotte Rockefort, the northern frontier's thorny rose, was following me? Was she infatuated with my charm? Thinking of her beauty and status, I felt invincible. "Dress me." I shoved my companion aside. "Bring my new fur-trimmed coat. I'm going to meet Lady Charlotte." What a stroke of luck in this frozen wasteland. With servants scrambling, I donned my finest attire and doused myself in perfume. I stepped out, grimacing at the scent of mud and pine, ready to mount my horse and accidentally encounter the girl who supposedly pined for me. Just as I stepped into the stirrup, whoa! A deep, chilling horn blast erupted from the dense forest across the river. The sound tore through the afternoon silence, echoing with primal savagery. I shuddered, nearly falling from my horse. I looked toward the sound, my smug smile replaced by blank terror. What was that? The Solonians didn't keep me waiting. A swarm of arrows rained from the forest. They slammed into my disorganized, unsuspecting column. Every Solonian is a master archer. The volley was precise. Men and slaves fell like wheat, blood staining the earth. Panic spread instantly. We had no defense. Then, hundreds of Solen cavalry charged out like ghosts. They struck the weakest, most chaotic center of my column like a red-hot blade. Thorstein's timing was perfect. My vanguard was stuck in the river. My rear was bogged down by slow supply wagons and terrified slaves. We were cut in half. Shockingly, many Solonians wielded muskets smuggled from the Plantagenet kingdom. Gunshots rang out. My few armored knights were riddled with holes and fell. The cavalry then drew sabers and axes, slaughtering the demoralized survivors. My family's caravan collapsed. There was nowhere to run. Solonian infantry emerged to finish the job. They hunted every target, turning the creek into a slaughterhouse. Battle Commander Thorstein watched from a ridge, sneering. The battle was won. He only waited for the spoils. This ambush would more than cover his costs. A mile back, I watched through a brass telescope, a gift from Count Rochefort. Charlotte stood nearby, pale, gripping her sword hilt. It really is the Solonians. Carl, you were right, she cried, turning to her men. Armor up. Mount your horses. Now, she donned her breastplate, moving with practiced speed. I was already in my chainmail and butterfly helmet, Roland and the others ready. Charlotte mounted her horse. We must rescue them. Our horses are fresh. We can't watch them be slaughtered. She raised her saber to signal the charge. Wait, Charlotte. I commanded, my voice cold. She turned, eyes wide with disbelief. Why? You predicted this. They are dying. I lowered my telescope, my face expressionless. Wait until they are deep in the slaughter, distracted and arrogant. When their commander reveals himself, that is our moment. She stared at me, a realization dawning on her. You knew. You didn't intend to protect Cyril at all. You used his column as bait. My cavalry is just your tool for the harvest, isn't it? She raised her sword again. Cavalry. Prepare to. I said wait. I cut her off with absolute authority. I locked eyes with her. There is only one commander, hear me. Stand down. She froze, stunned by my sudden, iron-blooded command. She had never seen this side of me. My usual warmth was gone, replaced by the cold, decisive aura of a veteran. The chill in my eyes silenced her. Instinctively, she obeyed. My 90 elite cavalrymen stood still, the silence punctuated only by the distant screams of the dying. I raised my telescope again, waiting for the prey to reach their most vulnerable moment. The battle at the creek was ending. My column was destroyed. Survivors were being hunted down. The Solonians were busy looting, their formation scattering as they dismounted to gather spoils. Most importantly, Battle Commander Thorstein had finally revealed himself. The Solonians were already gleefully looting, stripping corpses, roping captives together, and gathering usable wagons and supplies. Their once tight formation inevitably loosened as many cavalry dismounted to join the looting. Most importantly, Battle Commander Thorstein has finally revealed himself. I sat atop my warhorse, clad in a polished, ornate breastplate looted from a fallen Plantagenet knight, its brilliance marking me as the commander. I surveyed the battlefield with satisfaction, shouting, "Hurry! Don't kill everyone. Capture the survivors. They're valuable slaves." My scout, Ragnar, dragged a mud-caked, sobbing youth in tattered noble finery before my horse. "Boss, look what we caught. A big fish, the young master of the Eichberg house." Ragnar cheered. Cyril von Eichberg, trembling with terror, collapsed to his knees and kowtowed frantically. "Don't kill me. I'm the Duke's son. My father will pay a massive ransom. Just let me go." I looked down at the spineless noble with a sneer of contemptuous satisfaction. Capturing a Duke's son was a prize far greater than mere loot. Just as I ordered him secured, the situation shifted. A thunderous roar of hooves erupted from our rear. 90 elite Plantagenet cavalry, led by Charlotte and me, surged like a flood toward the disorganized Solonians. Our arrowhead formation aimed directly at the armored Thorstein. I led the charge, my saber pointed straight at him. The Solonians were caught completely off guard, never expecting a fresh, elite force to strike while they were distracted by their victory. Thorstein's grin froze into horror. Before he could even draw his blade, Ragnar reacted. The veteran scout instinctively drew his cavalry bow and fired, not at me, but at my charging horse. Thwip! The arrow pierced my horse's neck. It collapsed, sending me flying. I tumbled across the ground before regaining my footing. I sprang up instantly, swinging my saber at Ragnar in one fluid motion. Ragnar blocked with his wooden bow, the wood splintering under the force of my strike, sending him reeling. I pressed the attack, forcing him to draw his hand axe. We clashed, steel ringing against iron. Though he was more experienced, my momentum kept us evenly matched. During our struggle, Charlotte's cavalry surged into the Solonians like a red-hot blade. Charlotte cut down a Solonian trying to mount his horse, while her riders decimated the rear guard with spears and sabers. Several riders swarmed Thorstein. He was struck in the shoulder by a spear and fell, his fate uncertain. Yet, the Solonians were seasoned veterans. Even with their commander down, they didn't collapse. Officers rallied the survivors into small, circular defensive formations. Spearmen faced outward to repel our horses, while battle-axe wielders struck at legs and fallen riders, turning the battle into a brutal stalemate. Our riders suffered as Solonians hacked at their horses, dragging knights down to be finished off by axes. Conversely, our cavalry shattered their lines, trampling and skewering them. Despite the chaos, our superior equipment kept us in control. We squeezed their formations tighter. Meanwhile, my duel with Ragnar reached a breaking point. I parried his axe, but he leaped back, blew a sharp whistle, and shouted in the Solen language. The Solonians immediately began a disciplined retreat toward the forest. Seeing the tactical withdrawal, Charlotte knew better than to pursue into the dense woods. She signaled for a halt. We watched as the Solonians abandoned their dead and retreated into the black forest like a receding tide. The riverbank was left a blood-soaked ruin, littered with the terrified remnants of Cyril's party. Watching the enemy vanish, Charlotte dismounted and anxiously searched the battlefield for me. She had seen me fall and was consumed by worry. She pushed through the crowd until she found me. I was standing by some corpses, excitedly gesturing to Roland. "Did you see that, Roland?" I almost split that barbarian's head open. His experience saved him, but it was so close. I was so caught up in the adrenaline that I didn't even notice the blood and dust on my armor. Seeing me perfectly fine and still buzzing with excitement, Charlotte's relief turned into pure fury. She stomped her foot, glared at me, and stormed off without a word. I blinked, confused, and chased after her. "Charlotte? What's wrong? Are you hurt?" She ignored my attempts to soothe her, her face cold as she marched toward her horse. The casualty report arrived: 22 Solonians dead, 12 of our cavalry fallen. The veterans felt a chill. Even with the element of surprise, the Solonians had nearly traded 1 for 2. In typical Plantagenet Solen warfare, our losses were usually 5 or 10 times theirs. This was a rare victory, but it proved how dangerous these Solonians were. Cyril's forces were decimated. Over 300 of his 500 men were dead. The rest were wounded or captured, and his supplies were gone. I didn't care about ownership. I ordered my men to seize all abandoned supplies, grain, and loot. Cyril was dragged out from under a pile of corpses, shivering in terror. Charlotte, having regained her composure, told him coldly, "Cyril, our escort mission is over. You are on your own." Cyril begged, "Charlotte, it's too dangerous. Please, escort me to my castle, and I will reward you handsomely." Charlotte looked at his pathetic groveling, then back at me, her disdain deepening. She sneered and pointed her saber at his crotch. "Wipe yourself off before you speak to me." Cyril looked down to find he had soiled himself in fear. He was mortified, wishing the ground would swallow him. Charlotte ignored him and ordered, "Assemble, collect our dead, gather the loot, and we return." My transport team was already prepared to move. We left the blood-stained Icewater Creek with our spoils and the heavy hearts of those who survived the Pyrrhic victory. Cyril was left behind in the ruins, abandoned and hopeless. By evening, we made our final camp on a high ground far from the creek. Tomorrow, we would part ways. I was to head north to Conford with the supply train, while Charlotte would lead her cavalry south to France City. The camp was stifling. The joy of victory was dampened by the loss of comrades, and the Cold War between Charlotte and me made the air heavy. Roland seized a moment to whisper, "My lord, I think you should apologize to Lady Charlotte." I glanced at him. Roland pressed on, "Your battlefield decisions were correct, but Charlotte trusted you. She fought for those cavalry reinforcements, only to be berated by you. She is truly angry." I sighed. Roland was right. Professionally, I was justified, but personally, I had hurt her. My tone had been too harsh. I nodded and headed to her camp. Usually, I could enter freely, but today, 2 stoic guards blocked my path. "Lord Carl, please wait. We must inform the captain." I knew Charlotte had ordered this. I waited. A guard returned, expressionless. "Apologies, Lord Carl. The captain is resting and does not wish to be disturbed." I wasn't surprised by the rejection. I noticed the other guard suppressing a smile. I slipped a few silver coins into the messenger's hand, whispering, "Brother, help me out. I just need a few words." The guard felt the coins and exchanged a look with his partner. They knew she wasn't sleeping, just sulking. Everyone knew our relationship. She wouldn't ignore me forever. They decided to take the bribe and do a favor. The guard stepped aside, whispering, "Be quick, my lord." We saw nothing. "Thank you." I hurried to Charlotte's tent. I knocked softly. "Charlotte? It's me. May I come in?" Silence. Then her muffled voice. "Didn't I say I was sleeping?" "I know you aren't," I sighed. "I'm here to apologize for my tone on the battlefield. I shouldn't have yelled at you. I'm sorry." The curtain parted slightly, revealing her annoyed face. "Is that all you're apologizing for?" I looked at her sincerely. "No. I apologize for exploiting your trust. My premonition was a plan to use Cyril's men as bait, and I requested your cavalry to bolster my counterattack. I treated you and your soldiers as pawns without telling you. That was my mistake." Her icy expression softened. She wasn't petty. She was hurt because she had been kept in the dark and her trust had been used for a cold-blooded plan. She stepped out, eyes locked on mine. "I'm not mad about the yelling. I'm mad that you didn't trust me. If you had told me the plan, I would have helped you even better. Instead, I felt like a fool realizing I was part of your scheme at the very end." I felt a pang of guilt. "You're right. I underestimated you. I promise it won't happen again. I will be transparent with you from now on." Seeing my genuine remorse, her anger dissipated. She wasn't one to hold grudges, especially since the plan had succeeded. She pouted and held out her hand. "Fine. Remember what you said." I shook her hand firmly. "I will." The tension seemed to vanish with that soldier-like handshake. Under the campfire light, our faces softened. Tomorrow's departure was inevitable, but our trust felt deeper now. At dawn, we stood at the crossroads. "I must go," I said, looking toward Conford. "I've been away too long." Charlotte nodded, a hint of melancholy in her voice. "Don't forget your promise." I smiled. "Never. Once I repair the castle, you are welcome to visit or stay." She blushed and turned away. "Go. Be careful." We parted ways. I headed north with the supplies and craftsmen. She returned south to France City. Without Cyril's dead weight, we moved quickly. We reached home in a single day. By the next morning, the silhouette of a recovering Conford appeared on the horizon. The changes were visible as we approached. The wasteland at the foot of the mountain had been cleared into fertile farmland. Farmers were busy plowing the fields. As I rode by, they cheered and tipped their hats. "The Lord is back." The news spread like wildfire. When I entered the inner city, the streets were packed with cheering civilians and soldiers. Their support warmed me. Brendan and Richter hurried over. "My lord, you're back," Brendan said, his face full of relief. "We were worried you'd run into trouble." Richter added, "Indeed. Our grain stocks were dwindling. Everyone was waiting for you." I patted their shoulders. "We had issues, but they're resolved. We have plenty of supplies. Let's get the grain stored and the craftsmen settled." We gathered in the castle's main hall, now a makeshift council room. I chaired our first meeting. "The best news," I announced, "is that we have enough grain to last until the autumn harvest, plus tools and supplies. The crisis is over." Everyone sighed in relief, smiles breaking across their faces. I brought back 8 craftsmen. I instructed Mr. Moore to house them in the inner city and integrate them into production. To prevent internal competition, I am establishing a 3-tier ranking system for them. I explained, Level 1 is for masters with major contributions, Level 2 for skilled workers, Level 3 for beginners. Apprentices are separate. Compensation and status will reflect these ranks. You, my earliest followers, are all Level 1. Mr. Moore noted this down, praising the system as a great incentive for craftsmanship, and promised to draft the regulations. Moore reported that spring plowing is nearly complete. We've adopted a suggestion from a slave named Agricola, a former agricultural advisor, to intercrop rye and peas to improve soil nitrogen. I have approved this. Moore presented a document to promote Agricola to a freeman and hire him as our agricultural advisor. I signed and stamped the document without hesitation, emphasizing that I value talent regardless of past status. Hans the stonemason reported that flint mining is underway. While flint is too soft for weapons, it is perfect for flintlock ignition stones. However, production is low, and we lack the technology to manufacture the muskets themselves. I told Hans that I've brought more stonemasons to help him increase output and quality. We will solve the technical issues in time. I turned to Brendan, Richter, and Roland, my tone turning grave. Economic growth is vital, but military readiness is paramount. I recounted our recent skirmish at Icewater Creek, where we suffered heavy losses despite a surprise attack. I described how the Solonians, even without commanders, fought with such instinct and ferocity that they inflicted a 2-to-1 casualty ratio against us. If the kingdom's elite cavalry struggled, our current forces are paper-thin, I warned. We must train rigorously, or Conford will fall again. My officers felt the weight of the situation. Brendan frowned, noting that these Solonians were far superior to the usual raiding parties. They were a true army. He urged us to fortify the walls and train new recruits immediately, as our current numbers are insufficient. Richter added that we must purge the weak, consolidate our best gear for the bravest soldiers, and begin combat drills this afternoon. Roland suggested establishing a network of watchtowers and more frequent patrols to avoid being caught off guard. I concluded by mentioning Count Rockefeller's promise of supplies, livestock, tools, and iron, on one condition. He demands that when the Solonians strike this autumn, we hold Conford to the last man, without retreating a single step. A heavy, resolute silence filled the hall. Brendan spoke first, vowing to live and die with the city we rebuilt from ruins. Old Moore agreed, calling the castle his life's work and his child. He would not leave. Richter struck his chest, declaring that the city guard does not retreat and that we would use the invaders' blood to honor our fallen. Roland and the others joined in the vow. Seeing their determination, I felt both warmed and burdened by the responsibility. Good, I said. We will make Conford an unbreakable bone for the Solonians. Dismissed. 3 days later, Charlotte returned to France City. She left all captured supplies for me, knowing I needed them more. She brought back 22 corpses of Solonians, a rare and morale-boosting trophy for the Plantagenet kingdom. In our long war, the kingdom rarely wins, and the Solonians usually recover their dead. They are disciplined in retreat, making it nearly impossible for us to secure proof of victory. A single Solonian head is a rare prize, as we often lose thousands for nothing. When Charlotte displayed the 22 bodies in the square, it caused a sensation. Count Rockefeller emerged, stunned by the sight of the genuine Solonian corpses. He was visibly excited, inspecting the wounds and gear. Charlotte confirmed the kill and reported on the battle at Icewater Creek. She omitted my role in using Cyril's unit as bait. She claimed she only realized the danger after Cyril's unit had already been devastated. The Count praised their counterattack, which broke the Solonian center and forced them to abandon their dead. He asked about Cyril von Eichberg, fearing the political fallout of a duke's son dying. Charlotte sneered that Cyril was unharmed, save for wetting himself in fear. The Count sighed in relief, dismissing Cyril's cowardice as trivial compared to the value of the 22 heads. He was clearly delighted by the victory. He asked if I had complained about her taking the trophies. Charlotte replied that I had taken the supplies and gifted her the bodies as a gesture of gratitude. The Count laughed, pleased with my cooperation, and noted that he owed me a favor. He ordered his scribe to preserve the heads and send them to the royal capital with his report, calling it a major victory for the northern frontier. The scribe began the preparations. The square was filled with the cheers of the crowd. The count watched with pride. This victory not only proves my daughter's capability, but also solidifies my governance of the northern territory, securing my political capital in the royal capital. Ironically, this success traces back to Karl von Schmidt. That boy is truly a lucky charm. I find my estimation of him rising. 7 days later, at Jarvik, in the northwest of the Northern Territory. This is a core settlement of the Solen barbarians, resembling a chaotic military encampment rather than a structured Plantagenet kingdom town. Rough timber and stone huts are scattered about, the air thick with the stench of livestock, leather, and dying campfires. Flags representing the 8 Solen legions, wolf, bear, tiger, sparrow, horse, hound, sword, and rain, fly everywhere. These legions are not equal in status. The wolf, bear, and tiger legions are the core, commanded directly by the great chieftain Harold. The remaining 5 legions possess greater autonomy, but hold less power and prestige. Inside the grand hall marked with the sword banner, the atmosphere is suffocating. The hall is lit by braziers, with beast skulls and weapons adorning the walls. Fierce, bearded chieftains sit below 3 massive bearskin-covered chairs. Great Chieftain Harold sits in the center, his expression calm yet imposing. To his right sits Ulf, commander of the Sparrow Legion, a sharp-eyed man idly playing with a skinning knife. In the center, Ivar, the hulking, scarred commander of the Sword Legion, is brutally whipping a kneeling man. The sound of the whip tearing through the air and striking flesh is sickening. The victim is the scout Ragnar, who grits his teeth against the pain, his back a bloody mess. Other officers who fled Icewater Creek kneel behind him, trembling. Harold watches coldly, remaining silent. Ulf seems disinterested, lost in his own thoughts. Ivar, whose Sword Legion is the weakest of the 8, is enraged. The loss at Icewater Creek, 22 dead and a dozen mortally wounded, consisted of elite soldiers, not mere slaves. Such losses are devastating to a legion as small as the Sword Legion. Exhausted, Ivar throws the bloody whip aside and roars at the near-unconscious Ragnar, calling him a useless coward. He turns to Harold, demanding an immediate mobilization to slaughter the Plantagenet forces at Icewater Creek and capture their female commander. Ragnar weakly begs for a chance to redeem himself. Harold stands, placing a calming hand on Ivar's shoulder, advising caution against potential enemy traps. Ivar, though still furious, respects Harold and reluctantly sits down. Harold asks Ulf for his assessment of the Plantagenet forces and their commander. Ulf notes that the new northern governor, Rockefort, is a cunning man. He praises the female commander's ruthlessness in using her own nobles as bait. He suggests waiting until after the autumn harvest to launch a full-scale invasion, as the enemy has likely already retreated to safety. Harold agrees with Ulf's logic. He tells Ivar that restoring morale and focusing on spring plowing take precedence over immediate war. Harold demotes Thorstein for poor command and reduces Ragnar and the other officers to common soldiers in the Vanguard Battalion. He promises Ivar reinforcements from vassal tribes. Ivar, though dissatisfied with the light punishment for Thorstein, accepts the reinforcements and storms out. Harold watches him go, shaking his head. He must maintain a balance between the legions. Crushing the Sword Legion would be unwise. His gaze turns south, intrigued and wary of Governor Rockefort and the mysterious female commander. It seems the Plantagenet kingdom has finally produced a worthy opponent. 1 month later, in the Franklin region of the central Plantagenet kingdom. This fertile, wealthy land is the heart of the Schmidt family's territory. The Schmidt family's rise is a classic epic of a knightly ascent. Starting as blacksmiths, they were ennobled for their service during the founding wars. Generations of military service eventually secured them the title of Duke in these vast lands. At dawn, Duke Schmidt, a dignified but weary middle-aged man, finishes a morning tryst with his latest mistress. He follows his routine, washing, dressing, and heading to his study to handle administrative duties. He prefers clearing tedious tasks before enjoying his breakfast. He efficiently processes reports of land disputes and refugee raids with growing impatience. His attention is caught by a letter from Karl von Schmidt. The name triggers a memory of his third wife, Irene Withers. Irene, from a fallen noble house, had once captivated me with her beauty and innocence, leading to our marriage despite family opposition. However, my devotion was fleeting. Once the novelty faded and Irene became pregnant, her physical changes and emotional volatility caused me to lose interest. My father, Duke Schmidt, always despised me for lacking talent in magic or as a knight, viewing me as a mediocre disappointment. He relegated my mother, Irene, to a remote wing and dismissed me to the northern frontier with malicious indifference, giving me the common name Karl. Yet, the Duke was surprised to receive a letter from me, the son he thought was sent to die. As he read, his casual attitude vanished. I described my arrival at Conford, the reconstruction, the clearing of goblins, and the discovery of the flint mine, while logically outlining the strategic value and potential profit for our family, finally requesting investment for further development. The Duke tapped his fingers on the desk. Conford, that famous graveyard of ruins? If my claims were true, a secure stronghold in the northern frontier was far more valuable than a useless son. Investment, he mused. He didn't care if I lived or died, but a bridgehead in the north for a few thousand gold coins was a bargain. He summoned the butler. Grant his request. Send 1,000 gold and supplies of equal value. But the Duke's eyes flashed with cunning. Tell the delivery team to stay in Conford under the guise of supervising construction. Have a reliable man observe the truth of the mine and my leadership, then report back to me. Yes, Duke, the butler bowed. Finishing the investment, the Duke noticed another letter in the envelope. He saw the gentle handwriting addressed to my dear mother, and realized it was meant for Irene. He felt nothing for his forgotten wife, but after a moment's hesitation, he told the butler, "Deliver this to Lady Irene." The butler accepted it, surprised. Watching him leave, the Duke reread my letter, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "Karl, my mediocre son, it seems the northern winds have given you some unexpected thorns. Let me see what you can truly accomplish." At the edge of the grand Franklin estate, near a silent birch forest, stood a small, tidy stone house. This was the residence of Lady Irene Withers, the current Duchess. Unlike the rumors of a miserable, weeping outcast, the cottage was impeccably maintained. Flowers bloomed on the windowsills, and the path was free of weeds. Irene had chosen this isolation herself, refusing servants and keeping only one loyal maid. She didn't harbor pure hatred for the Duke's coldness. She knew that without his past favor, she would have been a pawn in a political marriage to some senile baron. He had given her a brief period of genuine affection and the honor of being a duchess. What she could never forgive was his discarding of our son, Karl, to the death trap of the north. She remembered kneeling before his study, begging for mercy, only to be met with "the matter is decided." Her heart died that day. Moving out was her final act of protest. It was a deliberate severance from the cold core of the family. The Duke, perhaps unable to accept being abandoned by a woman he deemed insignificant, allowed this distance as long as she remained out of sight. That afternoon, the butler arrived at her cottage, surprising her. "My lady," he said, bowing, "the Duke ordered me to deliver this letter to you." Irene took the plain envelope, thanked him, and opened it by the window in the afternoon sun. Seeing the familiar, earnest handwriting, "To my dear mother," her fingers trembled and her breath hitched. It was Karl. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I didn't dwell on the hardships, but wrote with a newfound confidence, describing how I led the people to clear ruins, build homes, and defeat green-skinned dwarves. I detailed the improvements in Conford and the resolution of the food crisis. Finally, I promised that once I established a safe home, I would bring her there to live out her days away from Franklin. Tears of joy and relief streamed down her cheeks, blurring the ink. Her son was alive and carving out a future in the land of death. The gloom that had shrouded her for years vanished, replaced by a beam of sunlight. She clutched the letter like a treasure, reading it over and over. She looked in the mirror, seeing a woman whose eyes had regained their luster. She wiped her tears and straightened her hair, life suddenly had a purpose. Sitting back down, she wore the first genuine, hopeful smile she had shown in years. She began to ponder her reply and the day of our reunion. Outside, the birch trees swayed in the breeze. A month passed. Conford had awakened like a dormant beast, showing remarkable recovery. From the outer wall, the most heartening change was the farmland at the foot of the mountain. Once barren, the land was now covered in neat ridges of rye and pea sprouts. Farmers, both freemen and slaves, worked diligently, creating a scene of hope. The air smelled of soil and growth, promising a harvest, while the flint mine at the North Cliff was now fully operational. With Hans and the new stonemasons, the platforms were reinforced, greatly increasing efficiency. The sounds of chiseling and work chants echoed against the cliffs. Baskets of high-quality flint were hoisted up and sent to the workshop for processing. While not a replacement for iron, these stones were being crafted into arrowheads, spear tips, and fire starters, providing vital resources. Regarding population, I kept my promise, granting 30 outstanding slaves the status of freemen. In truth, the daily treatment of slaves and freemen in Conford had become nearly identical. I didn't release everyone at once to maintain labor motivation and because of practical constraints. Conford was a military fortress with limited space and resources, not designed for a large permanent population. Future expansion would require developing new areas at the mountain's base, but my primary concern remained military fortification. Despite the iron provided by Count Rockefort, supplies remained tight, requiring careful allocation. We've substituted flint for arrowheads, while Hector and our smiths have worked tirelessly to forge new chainmail and repair old armor, significantly bolstering our soldiers' protection. Additionally, I have implemented a militia system. I tasked Brendan with this. Our 60 combat soldiers are full-time professionals, which ensures strength but consumes significant labor. The militia draws from able-bodied freemen and slaves, training them regularly while they continue production, ready to reinforce our defenses or support the army when needed. This expands our military capacity with minimal economic impact. Brendan, fully supportive, immediately began the selection process. Watching Brendan's industriousness, my vision for military reform crystallized. I decided to establish clear ranks, duties, and promotion paths to boost morale. As I pondered this, Old Moore approached with his ledgers and blueprints. "My lord," Moore said with anticipation, "with the food crisis eased, spring plowing underway, and our systems running smoothly, we have the resources to begin rebuilding the castle." He pointed to the ruined 3-story keep. "It is the soul of Conford. You cannot live in the barracks forever. It is time to restore it." A month ago, I would have hesitated, prioritizing agriculture and defense. Now, I agreed without delay for 2 reasons. First, Conford finally has the surplus resources to fund a major project. Second, and most importantly, I remembered my promise to Charlotte. She has hinted repeatedly at visiting, and it is unacceptable for me to host her in a barracks or a tent. Furthermore, I harbor a deeper hope. I want her to visit, and one day, to become the mistress of this castle. This thought drives me to provide an environment worthy of her. "Agreed, Mr. Moore," I declared firmly. "Rebuilding is a priority. Draft a list of resources and manpower. You have my full support." Moore beamed, producing a detailed plan he had clearly prepared in advance. "I am intimately familiar with the structure and load-bearing points," he explained. "It is an honor to plan this for you, my lord." I reviewed the proposal. It outlined everything from debris clearance and structural reinforcement to the phased construction of the framework and interior. We would start with the foundation and walls, then move to the frame, and finally the interior finishing. "Excellent," I said. "How many men do you need?" "At least 50 laborers for the initial phase, plus all my masons and half the carpenters," Moore replied. "Granted," I commanded. "The project begins tomorrow." "Yes, my lord." Moore bowed, his eyes alight with the craftsman's passion. He already saw the fortress rising from the ruins. Work commenced the following day. Under Moore's direction, workers began clearing the rubble from the keep. Mid-clearance, I recalled Master Andre's words regarding French City. Marcus, the former lord, had a secret command post where he made his final stand. His remains might still be there. I had promised to find and bury him. I asked Moore, Are you certain there is no basement? An old veteran mentioned a secret command post beneath the castle. Moore frowned, searching his memory. The interior was handled by the Lord's private consultants. I only managed the outer defenses. I was never told of such a space. I nodded and ordered. Search the ground floor carefully. Look for structural anomalies or signs of hidden chambers. The workers began tapping the floors, listening for hollow sounds. Soon, in the kitchen area, they discovered a hollow-sounding stone slab. Clearing the debris revealed a square entrance, clearly man-made. Found it, a worker shouted. Moore and I arrived as the men pried the heavy slab open. A foul, stagnant odor of dust and decay billowed out, forcing us back. Ventilate it first, I ordered. After half an hour, I descended with a torch, escorted by Moore and several soldiers. The basement was a cramped, 20-square-meter room. The torchlight revealed a grim scene. 4 or 5 skeletons in tattered Plantagenet armor lay scattered, frozen in their final moments of battle. The walls were scarred by blades and arrows, a testament to their desperate last stand. In the corner sat a figure of note. He wore a tattered cloak with noble embroidery, his skeleton remarkably intact. He sat against the wall on an overturned stool, head bowed as if sleeping. A rusted Solonian arrow was lodged precisely in his chest, piercing his heart. This was surely Lord Marcus. A wave of solemnity washed over me. He had rested here in dignity for 5 years. My lord, Moore whispered. I signaled the men. Wrap the count's remains in clean cloth. Collect the others as well. They are heroes of the kingdom and deserve a proper burial. The soldiers moved with reverence. As they lifted Marcus, something unexpected happened. A brass key fell from his ribcage with a clear, metallic ring. We froze. I picked up the key, coated in calcified dust. I realized then, the brave count had swallowed the key in his final moments to keep it secret from the Solonians. What did this key protect? My heart raced as the gravity of the discovery hit me. Quickly, search every inch of this room. I commanded, my voice urgent. Everyone began tapping and probing the walls. A soldier soon discovered a hollow sound behind the wall where Lord Marcus's remains rested. My lord, there is something strange here. I stepped forward, noticing a seamless stone block, and ordered the soldier to carefully chisel away the camouflage. An oak secret door with a simple keyhole appeared. I took a breath and inserted the brass key. Click! The lock opened. The 5-year-old key still functioned perfectly. The door revealed a small niche, barely large enough for a box. To our surprise, it contained no gold, but dusty alchemical glassware. Beakers, condensers, retorts, and mortars were neatly arranged on a wooden rack. Beside them sat a locked iron box. I had the soldier pry it open to find a well-preserved parchment titled Militia Potion Preparation Manual. It listed the primary ingredients: frost needle grass, chopped, and icefield thistle root, powdered. Also required: rock lichen, pine tear resin, snow berries, juiced, and pure melted snow. The manual specified a solvent, low-proof ale or grain spirits, and tools like a copper still, mortar, and glass containers. The rest of the parchment detailed the brewing process, heat control, and extraction times. I finally understood why Lord Marcus had died protecting this secret. This was a military-grade tonic capable of restoring stamina and healing minor wounds. In an era of cold steel, such a potion could turn the tide of battle and sustain an army. Seal this area, I commanded, suppressing my excitement. No one is to speak of this. Bury the remains properly, but these items. I took the parchment. Leave them here. No one enters the basement without my orders. With the basement secured, castle reconstruction resumed with renewed focus. Masons Hans and Norton led a rigorous inspection of the structural integrity. They hammered every pillar and wall, even venturing into dangerous corners. They concluded that despite the third-floor collapse, the lower levels remained stable, providing a solid foundation. Reinforcement began immediately. Workers installed temporary wooden supports for the beams and ceilings to ensure safety. Then came the massive cleanup. Large stones were repurposed for the outer walls, while rubble paved the inner-city roads. Thanks to Old Moore's prior efforts, the interior was cleared in half a day. The basic structure was revealed, ready for repairs. Masons patched cracks and holes with fresh mortar. Carpenters replaced rotted floor beams and ceiling joists. Windows were fitted with wooden frames and oilcloth. We prioritized the main hall, my residence, the kitchen, and storage areas. These areas were soon functional, dry, and habitable. Simultaneously, we restored the castle's military utility. Soldiers and veterans repaired the secret passages and trapdoors. Arrow slits were cleared to ensure clear lines of sight. The castle once again felt like a war machine. The third floor remained the biggest challenge. Hans, Wally, and Oldmore proposed abandoning the original stone tower design. Hans explained that rebuilding the stone third floor would be time-consuming and placed dangerous stress on the lower structure. We recommend a steep wooden roof instead, creating a large attic space, he suggested. Wally added that thick logs would make it sturdy enough to partition into rooms. It saves time, labor, and precious stone, he noted. A wooden roof is lighter, reducing pressure on the aging lower levels, he added. The attic can serve as a workshop or warehouse, and the steep, slate-covered roof will be fireproof and difficult to climb. Oldmore noted the only downside. It wouldn't look as majestic as the original stone tower. I agreed immediately. Practicality, safety, and efficiency come first. Forget the aesthetics. We executed the plan at once. Workers dismantled the unstable ruins, repurposing the stone for the city walls. Carpenters then began the heavy work of framing the roof. Massive logs were hoisted to the second floor and secured with iron bolts and braces to form a triangular frame. They laid rafters and covered them with fire-resistant slate tiles. The project progressed rapidly. Other craftsmen repaired the outer walls, restoring the castle's imposing appearance. Finally, we installed new wooden stairs. Carpenters built basic furniture, beds, tables, and chairs. The castle slowly came to life. A month later, the final scaffolding was removed. The people of Conford looked up at the reborn structure. The collapsed tower was gone, replaced by a sturdy, slate-covered roof with a rugged, imposing beauty. The patched walls stood as a testament to our resilience, stronger than ever. The once dark windows now featured new frames and oilcloth, with some even boasting low-quality glass from France City that shimmered in the sunlight. Carl, Moore, Brendan, Richter, and the construction crew stood in the inner courtyard, gazing at their work with immense pride. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy new oak doors, and entered the main hall. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting dappled shadows across the clean stone floor. The hall was empty but no longer dead. The air smelled of fresh timber and stone dust. With the roof, walls, and stairs restored, I headed upstairs to the Lord's quarters. The room was sparse, furnished only with a sturdy wooden bed and a desk, but the new window provided light and a view. I opened the window, letting in a refreshing breeze. From here, I could overlook all of Conford, the busy workshops, smoking chimneys, lush farmland at the mountain's base, and the distant river and forests. A heavy sense of responsibility and belonging washed over me. This was my home, the place I would fight to protect. Bang, 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 bang. On a cleared patch at the forest's edge, the air hung thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder mixed with fresh grass. 10 matchlock musketeers had just finished a ragged but loud volley. As the echoes faded, Sergeant Otto roared, "Clear the touch hole. Check for misfires. Move it, don't be slow. Reload." The militia scrambled to follow the complex loading drill. They carefully removed the smoldering matchgourd, cleared the touch hole of residue, and prepared for the next step. Otto's hawk-like gaze swept over them as he barked standardized commands to ensure synchronization. Present muskets. The men stood their heavy muskets up, retrieved powder horns, poured standard charges, loaded linen-wrapped lead balls, and rammed them home with rhythmic thuds. They primed the pan from small flasks and closed the covers. Check matchgourds. They adjusted their burning cords and clamped them back into the serpentines, ready for the next order. The process was tedious and dangerous. A single error could lead to a misfire or a burst barrel. Otto patrolled the line, his stick striking anyone who faltered or moved incorrectly, eliciting grunts of pain. "Fool. Too much priming powder. Do you want to blow yourself up? Faster. The Soren barbarians won't wait for you. Watch your matchgourd." Otto Anvil, once a slave, was now the sergeant of the 1st Militia Musket Platoon, earning 1 silver coin a month. He had been among the first to sign up after my recruitment order. His relentless training and strict adherence to orders earned him Brendan's recommendation. He worked so hard for 2 reasons: his profound gratitude and loyalty to me, Karl von Schmidt. Without me, he would still be a slave, denied the freedom, dignity, and life he now possessed. Secondly, his wife, Marissa, was pregnant, a joyous, heavy responsibility that fueled his drive. This news had left Otto ecstatic and more motivated than ever. He fought to protect Conford, the home that had given them a new life, for the sake of his wife and unborn child. This was the meaning of his struggle. Meanwhile, on the main path to the mountain, 30 militia members ran in formation. Clad in everyday cotton clothes and old hats, they looked like simple farmers. The only mark of their status was the red cloth tied around their left arms. It was the only uniform I could provide. Even Richter's professional city guard lacked standard uniforms, with only officers possessing chainmail and helmets. Despite their humble gear, Brendan's harsh training had transformed them from a ragtag group into a disciplined force. Below the path, the landscape had changed. Rye and peas thrived in the fields, swaying in the spring breeze. Farmers weeding the fields waved at the passing militia. This greenery was Conford's hope for survival. On the other side, brush had been cleared for a massive construction site. Oldmore stood on a slope, directing 50 newly minted freemen. I had recently granted them freeman status as a reward for their contributions to the spring plowing and mining. Since the inner city was crowded, they needed a new residential area. Expanding down the mountain was the logical next step. Straighten the foundation lines. Ram the earth hard. This is for your own homes. Don't be lazy. Bring the timber. More shouted, full of energy. In the inner city, I watched the combat soldiers conduct intense drills. I had reorganized all armed forces, dissolving the old distinctions. My 30 original veterans formed the 1st Combat Platoon, led by Brendan. The former Franz City Guard veterans formed the 2nd Combat Platoon, led by Richter. These 60 men were my core, full-time, best-equipped force. Roland was appointed my captain of the guard, responsible for my personal safety. 70 militia members, recruited from freemen and top-performing slaves, were split into 2 platoons. Miller led the 1st Militia Platoon, while Creek, a former City Guard sergeant, led the 2nd. These militia worked in production but trained regularly, serving as reserves. I introduced the rank of sergeant to bridge the gap between officers and men, ensuring tactical execution. With 130 men total, I had reached the size of a standard Plantagenet Kingdom infantry company. I pragmatically designated myself as the captain of the Conford Garrison Company. Brendan served as deputy captain, and the 2 platoons engaged in a fierce mock battle on the training ground. My soldiers practiced combat, with one side using wooden shields and padded spears to defend, while the other charged with wooden swords. Following officer commands, they cycled through formations, drilling basic tactics like attacking, defending, flanking, and line rotation. Though their movements remained stiff and coordination occasionally faltered, their focus and ferocity were vastly improved. Hold the line. Spearmen brace. Right flank, push up. Don't let them break through. Rear rank, prepare to throw. Fire. I watched intently, whispering critiques to Roland. As the drill paused, the sides retreated to rest. Brendan ran to me, stood at attention, and executed a sharp, swift salute to his temple. This was the new military salute I had recently introduced. Its simplicity and power had quickly won over the troops. Reporting, Commander. 1st and 2nd ranks have completed the drill. Awaiting orders. Brendan panted, his voice booming. I returned the salute and nodded. Overall progress is good, but the 1st rank's flank transition is slow, and the 2nd rank's charge lacks resolve. If the enemy were Solonians, you would have lost 5 men. We're drilling this again this afternoon. Yes, Commander, Brendan shouted, smiling. Still, these boys are much stronger than before. At least they follow orders now. A militia sentry with a red armband sprinted up, saluted, and reported, Lord, a supply caravan of 10 wagons and 20 guards has arrived at the perimeter. They claim to be from the Schmidt family, sent by the Duke to deliver supplies. They gave me this letter for you. The sentry handed me a wax-sealed letter. I remained composed despite my internal surprise, breaking the seal. The scribe's handwriting was cold and official. To Karl von Schmidt, Lord of Conford, we have noted your progress in the northern frontier, which shows the resilience expected of the Schmidt family. Given the hardships of early settlement, we are providing initial aid: 1,000 gold coins, 3,000 pounds of quality pig iron, 50 farm tools, 20 sets of fine carpentry tools, and 10 barrels of light ale for the soldiers. Steward Hans Gruen is in charge of the transport. Please inspect and store these goods upon receipt. Use these resources well to consolidate your territory and bring honor to the Schmidt family. I scanned the letter, my eyes narrowing. 1,000 gold coins and 3,000 pounds of iron. My father was surprisingly generous. I knew this wasn't fatherly affection, but a calculated political investment. The Duke clearly saw potential strategic value in Conford and expected a return on his capital. Unlike Count Rochefort, the letter used the term aid rather than loan or mortgage, maintaining a grand posture. I knew the old Duke was greedier than the Count. The Count only wanted me as a buffer. My father, however, wanted total control over my territory. Regardless, this was a godsend for Conford, especially the iron and gold. Is it supplies from the Duke, my lord? Brendan asked curiously. Yes, I replied flatly. Let's go, Brendan. Join me to receive these goods and see what my generous father has sent. My tone held a trace of mockery, but mostly anticipation for the timely relief. Whatever his motives, these resources would accelerate Conford's growth. The family's reach had finally extended to this frontier. Whether this was a blessing or a curse remained to be seen, but I was confident I could turn this outside influence to my advantage. On the mountain road outside Conford, the caravan of 10 wagons and 20 guards slowed to a halt. At the lead was a refined four-wheeled carriage. A young knight beside it reined in his horse and said to the occupant, "Lord Edgar, it seems. Lord Karl's territory is truly different from the rumors." A gloved hand pulled back the curtain, revealing the stern, scrutinizing face of Edgar, one of Duke Schmidt's stewards, sent to oversee the delivery. Edgar didn't answer immediately, instead scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. They had passed several pioneer territories on the way north from France City. Those places were uniformly desolate, with pathetic defenses and soldiers who looked like listless, poorly armed peasants. Those camps looked ready to collapse at a gust of wind, let alone withstand Solonians, kobolds, or goblins. Yet, my territory presented a starkly different scene. First, they were stopped at the mountain pass by 2 alert, spear-wielding militiamen with red armbands. The sentries were plain-clothed but vigilant, clear in their questioning, and meticulous in their vehicle inspection. The road to the castle, while dirt, was leveled and widened, with drainage ditches dug along the sides. At the foot of the mountain lay lush, orderly farmland, clearly well-tended. Further away, near the river, a new residential area was being built with organized, vibrant energy. The castle on the hillside, though showing signs of repair, stood structurally sound with flags flying and patrols visible on the ramparts. The entire territory exuded an air of busy, orderly resilience. Edgar dropped the curtain, his usual rigid expression softening into disbelief. Indeed unexpected. When he received the order to deliver supplies to that useless 7th son, he had been deeply dismissive. His impression of me was stuck in the past. I had been a silent, untalented, mediocre, and cowardly boy among my brothers. I was the most useless of the Duke's sons. My eldest brother, Friedrich, was a renowned Tier 4 knight guarding Blackrock Pass under Count Eisenberg. My second brother, Caspar, was a celebrated genius in the royal capital, favored by the king. My third brother, Conrad, was a talented mage who had studied at the Academy of Arcane Arts. My other brothers had all achieved success in their own fields. Only I, the magic-insulated outcast, had been sent to the north, a move everyone saw as a death sentence. After all, my mother, Anna, was merely a minor noblewoman of little consequence. Edgar recalled how he had personally arranged the chance encounter between the Duke and my mother. He had expected me to vanish in the northern snows. It seems the Duke's blood has finally taken effect, he muttered to himself. Even the most unremarkable son can be forced to show potential in the north. He couldn't deny what he saw. I had actually built something on this wasteland. The task suddenly felt less tedious. "Oh, he's coming," Edgar noted, spotting me leading a small squad from the inner gate. Edgar straightened his robes, signaled the driver to stop, and stepped out of the carriage to observe me more closely. My silhouette sharpened against the sunlight. I wore a thick, fur-collared wool coat, a sturdy belt cinched at my waist, and a wide-brimmed felt hat that cast shadows over my face. Months of military life in the northern frontier had chiseled my features and bronzed my skin, replacing my youthful softness with a hardened, decisive air. While I inherited my mother Irene's delicate base, my current demeanor, a blend of soldierly grit and lordly authority, bore a striking resemblance to Duke Schmidt in his youth. Behind me followed my officers, including the loyal veteran Brendan and the impulsive young Roland. The other officers were strangers to Edgar, yet their sharp eyes and steady gait marked them as battle-hardened veterans. Edgar noted my growing roster of talent, while a dozen cold-eyed combat soldiers brought up the rear. They scanned Edgar's knights with open, wary scrutiny. Edgar realized these men owed no allegiance to the Schmidt family. Their loyalty belonged solely to me, Karl von Schmidt. This realization significantly elevated Edgar's opinion of me. I was no longer the destitute, pathetic youth he had expected, but a capable lord who had firmly established himself in the frontier with a loyal force. His knights exchanged surprised glances, clearly finding the scene far different from their expectations. I stepped forward with a measured smile and extended my hand. "Mr. Edgar, you've had a long journey. Welcome to Conford." My voice was steady and resonant, carrying the warmth of a host and the authority of a lord. Edgar composed himself, offering a professional, respectful bow as he shook my hand. "You are too kind, young master. I am merely here on the Duke's orders to deliver supplies and assist in your endeavors in the northern frontier. I will keep my father's concern in mind," I replied, my tone sincere but my eyes calm, showing no excessive excitement over the support. I gestured for them to follow. "You must be tired. Please rest in the castle while I have my staff handle the supplies." "As you wish, young master," Edgar replied. I led the way, while Edgar followed, his eyes scanning every detail like a surveyor. The vibrant fields and bustling construction sites clearly left a strong impression on him. I called out toward the site. "Mr. Moore, set aside the residential expansion. I have more important matters for you." A gray-haired but energetic old craftsman hurried over, breathless but efficient. "My lord, what is it? And who are these people?" He looked at Edgar's group with curiosity. I introduced them. "This is Mr. Edgar, the family's chief steward, sent by Duke Schmidt. Mr. Edgar, this is Mr. Moore, Conford's scribe and chief engineer, who has been instrumental in our reconstruction." Edgar bowed slightly, correcting me. "You flatter me, young master. The true chief steward is Sebastian. I am merely a subordinate handling external affairs." He maintained a low profile while clarifying his actual standing. I smiled and instructed Moore. "Mr. Moore, please handle the intake and storage of the supplies Mr. Edgar has brought." "Understood, my lord," Moore replied, turning to Edgar. "Mr. Edgar, please follow me to settle the handover." Edgar signaled his deputy to follow Moore while he continued toward the castle with me. His shock grew as we progressed. The corridor leading to the castle was rigged with hidden defensive traps and stockpiles of boulders, clearly prepared for an assault. Passing through, the drawbridge was lowered, opening the castle gates. We crossed the repaired drawbridge into the outer city. The area was crowded with semi-underground dwellings and new stone huts, all kept clean and orderly. I explained, "We are still in the early stages. Once the new residential area below is complete, the subjects will move, and this will become a purely military fortress." "Understood, young master. Practicality and safety are paramount," Edgar agreed, though he kept watching the commoners. He noticed the farmers and craftsmen stopping to greet me with genuine respect and affection, a reaction that could not be faked. This gave him a new perspective on my governance as we moved toward the inner city. Noticing Edgar staring at the jammed portcullis, I explained, "That is our biggest headache. It was damaged in the final battle and is stuck." We haven't been able to move it without risking the structural integrity of the walls. I pointed to the side. So, we chose a compromise. Edgar looked at the breach in the wall next to the gate. My craftsmen had utilized the gap, reinforcing it with logs and stone to create a narrow but sturdy secondary entrance. Though less grand, the new gate was heavily reinforced with iron and featured firing ports and murder holes, maintaining its defensive utility. It is a temporary measure, I added. When we have more resources, we will address the main gate. Edgar examined the jammed gate and the makeshift entrance, his eyes showing appreciation. He nodded. A pragmatic and efficient solution, young master. Rather than wasting resources on a stubborn problem, you chose to create a reliable new path. You and your craftsmen have done well. We entered the inner city, where a simple but spacious training ground housed soldiers practicing drills and formations. Edgar's knights watched with interest, whispering their assessments. They recognized that such discipline and intensity required significant time, investment, and rigorous training. Finally, I led them toward the main keep. Edgar was drawn to the steep, wooden roof structure, a departure from traditional stone castles. I explained, budget and labor were limited. The original stone tower collapsed, so we opted for this structure. It's faster, cheaper, and practical. Edgar praised, pragmatic and efficient. To restore a ruin to this state in such a short time shows great resolve and ability. His praise was no longer mere courtesy. It was genuine admiration. The reconstructed castle, the disciplined soldiers, and the devoted subjects all spoke to my capabilities. Edgar's previous disdain had vanished, replaced by a cautious respect and a need to reevaluate me. It seemed I had truly forged a sharp edge in the harsh environment of the north. I led them through the renovated corridor into the Lord's Hall. It was simple, but the previous decay was gone. A large stone fireplace burned brightly, dispelling the northern chill and warming the hall. The walls were decorated with simple banners and weapons, and the floor was covered in clean, sturdy wooden planks. A massive, heavy table sat in the center of the hall, surrounded by newly crafted chairs. I naturally took the head seat. Brendan, Richter, and Roland sat to my right, representing the core management of Conford. Edgar and his two assistants and knights took their places on my left. The atmosphere across the table was superficially cordial, but carried the weight of a formal negotiation. After a brief silence, Edgar spoke with professional, distant respect. Young Master Carl, I am here to convey the Duke's satisfaction with your initial progress in the northern frontier. He gestured, and an assistant handed me a clear inventory list. This is the list of supplies, now stored in the outer city under Mr. Moore's supervision, Edgar continued. The Duke views this as both support for your endeavors and an important assessment. He paused, looking at me steadily. If Conford maintains this prosperity under your leadership, the family will continue to invest, helping you turn this place into a true fortress and the vanguard of the Schmidt family. However, he added with undeniable weight, if development stalls or you suffer major setbacks, this investment will cease. Franklin's resources are not infinite. His words were flawless, framing the aid as a calculated investment rather than a gift, while clearly defining his bottom line. I accepted the list calmly. I was well aware of my father's calculating nature and felt no surprise. I understand, I replied, setting the list aside. Thank you for the Duke's consideration. Conford will prove the value of this investment. Edgar smiled perfectly. The Duke has high expectations. To ensure effective coordination and accurate reporting, he wishes for me to remain in Conford for a time to assist you with family-related matters and the allocation of supplies. I understood his intent but feigned welcome. That is excellent. Conford is in its infancy and needs experienced talent. Your presence will surely smooth communication with the family. You are welcome here. We exchanged smiles, both fully aware of the other's true intentions, yet maintaining perfect etiquette. Old Moore entered and whispered, My lord, the supplies, gold, pig iron, tools, and ale, have been verified and are of excellent quality. Good work, Mr. Moore, I nodded. Edgar turned to his subordinates. You are no longer needed here. Follow Mr. Moore's instructions. They bowed to me and left with Moore. Brendan and Richter soon excused themselves to attend to defenses and training, while Roland stood guard outside. We were left alone, sitting across from each other by the flickering hearth. The atmosphere grew more subtle and direct. The real conversation was just beginning. The firelight danced on my face, masking my inner thoughts. Edgar remained composed, though his eyes held a sharp, scrutinizing gaze. After a silence, Edgar broke the ice. He produced a simple, unsealed letter from his coat and pushed it toward me. "Young master," he said, his tone softening. "Before I left Franklin, Lady Irene insisted I deliver this to you personally." My mother's name stirred something within me. I took the letter, feeling the faint, lingering scent of home on the paper. Dealing with the Duke was simple. It was merely mutual exploitation. But this stranger, my mother, I didn't know how to face her. I could feel her love, but I questioned if I possessed the corresponding love of a son. I snapped out of my reverie. "Is mother well?" Edgar observed me closely. "She is well. She lives quietly in the house by the birch forest and misses you often. She was very comforted by your last letter. Her spirits have improved," he added. My shoulders relaxed slightly. I tucked the letter into my coat to read later in private. "Thank you, Edgar. I appreciate you bringing this." "It is my duty, young master," he bowed. After another silence, Edgar rubbed his leather gloves, choosing his words. Our shadows stretched and danced against the stone walls. "Young master," he said casually, "while passing through France City, I heard some interesting rumors." I looked at him, waiting. "It seems Count Rochefort, the new governor, thinks highly of you, and that you are well acquainted with his daughter, Charlotte Rochefort." I knew this was the core of his probe. The Schmidt family needed to know the nature of my relationship with the northern frontier's ruler to determine their own political strategy. I smiled, neither denying nor exaggerating. "Count Rochefort is a pragmatic governor. Conford needs to maintain good communication with the governor's mansion to secure the frontier. As for Lady Charlotte..." I paused, keeping my tone natural. "We met a few times in France City. She is a brave knight, and we fought side by side at Icewater Creek. We are comrades in arms." My answer was airtight, framing our connection as a professional necessity for the sake of the North. I kept our relationship at the level of comrades, leaving just enough room for speculation. Edgar studied me, trying to discern truth from artifice. He realized I was no longer the easily readable boy I once was. "I see," Edgar nodded. "Establishing such ties is beneficial for Conford. The Duke will be pleased to know you have secured such important allies." It was both an acknowledgement and a further probe into how much of this influence could be leveraged by the Schmidt family. I deflected, shifting to a pragmatic tone. Conford's development requires support from all sides, but ultimately, we must rely on ourselves. "Edgar, since you are staying, what are your thoughts on our development? I hear you are renowned for your management skills in Franklin." I threw the question back at him, testing his true role and intentions. A glint appeared in Edgar's eyes. He realized I was far more difficult to handle than anticipated. He smiled, shifting to practical matters. "Conford is vibrant and full of potential. The priority is to use the iron and tools to bolster our military and production while accelerating the development of the new district. Perhaps I can start by helping Mr. Moore optimize our supply management." "Excellent," I nodded. "I leave it to you, Edgar." We exchanged smiles. Our initial private meeting, filled with probing and tension, concluded. Both sides gained information while keeping their true hands hidden. Edgar confirmed my ties to the Rochefort family and my competence. I successfully stabilized the envoy and steered his focus toward the neutral domain of resource management. Edgar tactfully excused himself to inspect the flint mine, leaving me alone in the Lord's Hall. Silence returned. I took a deep breath and opened the letter from my mother, Anna. The handwriting was elegant yet shaky, reflecting an uneasy mind. "My dear Carl, I hope this finds you well. With Edgar heading north, I finally have a chance to send you a letter that won't be lost. I am well in Franklin, tending to my roses and reading. I often wonder if the northern frontier is cold and if you are well fed and cared for. Your previous letter brought me great relief. Knowing you reached Conford safely eased my heart. You've cleared ruins, repaired the castle, and fought monsters. It sounds so dangerous. Please, protect yourself. I know your father did not send you north out of kindness. But promise me, do not lose hope. You carry the blood of the Schmidt family, and in my resilience. I believe you will carve out your own path. Do not worry about me. I am accustomed to this quiet life. If you ever establish a safe, warm home, perhaps one day I could visit you? I've enclosed dried rose petals and lavender to help you sleep. Be careful. With love, your mother, Anna. The letter was concise, filled with restrained concern and a hidden, timid hope. A small sachet of dried flowers was tucked inside, smelling faintly of the garden. I stared at the letter, rubbing the sachet. A complex mix of responsibility and melancholy washed over me. This stranger, my mother, had pinned all her hopes on me. I sighed, folding the letter and tucking it into my inner pocket. I will give you a peaceful old age, mother, I promised silently. Composing myself, I left the hall and headed toward the flint mine on the northern cliff. Edgar was standing on the sturdy cantilevered platform, observing the operation with genuine amazement. Seeing me, he approached with praise. Young Master Carl, I am impressed not by the flint, which is common in the north, but by the ingenuity of your workers. He gestured to the platform and the pulley system. Building such a secure structure on these cliffs is remarkable. This system is worth more than the flint itself. It requires immense skill and courage. Frankly, this model of extraction and logistics could be applied to any mine for massive profit. I was pleased. Edgar's sharp eye had immediately grasped the value of my infrastructure. The Schmidt family knights approached to bid us farewell before returning to Franklin. It's late, I said politely. Stay the night in Conford and leave at dawn. It's safer. The knights looked to Edgar. Edgar nodded. Since the young master insists, we shall stay. Understood, the knights bowed. Suddenly, a commotion arose at the outer city gate. A new convoy had arrived. A large transport team was passing through the checkpoint. They flew the banner of France City. Count Rochefort's support had arrived. My guards let them pass without question, as per my standing orders. Edgar's gaze sharpened as he studied the convoy. The wagons were heavy, and the guards wore the standard leather armor of the France City Guard, interacting with my men with practiced familiarity. Edgar looked at me, his tone probing. Master, it seems your relationship with Governor Rochefort is far deeper than strictly business. This is consistent, tangible support. I felt a twinge of embarrassment. The timing was unfortunate. My earlier downplaying of the relationship had been exposed. Still, he would have discovered the support eventually. The Count values Conford's strategic position and provides logistical support. I trust you understand. Edgar offered a knowing smile, which only made me more uncomfortable. The convoy leader, a sergeant from France City, saluted me. Master Carl, by the Count's order, here are building materials and tools. Here is the manifest. He leaned in. The Count also says it is time to clear the ruins of Amber Bay. Rebuilding the pier will make sea transport faster and cheaper than the mountain roads. I took the list, intrigued. Opening a sea route would be a massive strategic leap for Conford. Understood. Thank the Count for me. His advice is timely. I turned to Roland. Reward the men as usual. Yes, master. Roland left, and the soldiers cheered, a routine occurrence. Edgar watched the interaction closely. His smile deepened. He now viewed my relationship with Count Rochefort as a high-level strategic alliance. Perhaps my connection to Charlotte was more than just comradeship as well. This seventh son was hiding much. The secret he had uncovered for the Schmidt family was worth far more than gold or iron. Conford was deeper and more interesting than he had imagined. Over the next few days, I had Oldmore take Edgar on a full tour. From irrigation and workshops to the new residential zones and training grounds, we showcased the full potential of Conford. This served both to satisfy Edgar's inspection and to demonstrate my confidence. I turned my attention to a more secretive task, brewing militia potion. I moved the dusty chemical apparatus found in Marcus's secret room to a secluded attic in the castle's third floor. The space was bright, spacious, and quiet, perfect for focused, confidential work. Oldmore admitted he knew nothing of alchemy, specializing only in construction and mechanics. The other craftsmen were merely blacksmiths, carpenters, and stonemasons. I had to rely on myself. Though not a chemist, my modern education and high school lab experience gave me an edge. I understood distillation, extraction, and safety far better than the local alchemists. At the very least, I knew how to control variables and maintain safety. During quiet moments, I retreated to the attic to experiment, following the parchment's instructions. I gathered the ingredients: frost needle grass, icefield thistle root, rock lichen, pine tear resin, and snow berry, along with low-alcohol ale from Edgar's supplies, and began the process. Despite the simple instructions, the process was difficult, but I succeeded after several failures. As the final drop of deep, bright red liquid hit the vial, a faint, sweet, herbal scent filled the air. It was a success. I carefully diluted the red liquid with melted snow. The liquid turned a translucent, ruby-like red, and the fragrance softened. I poured the result into 5 opaque glass bottles and sealed them with corks. This was the militia potion, the secret Marcus died protecting. Holding a bottle to the light, the color and texture looked authentic. The parchment only vaguely described its effects: boosts spirit, relieves fatigue, accelerates healing of minor wounds. I still needed to verify its efficacy, side effects, and dosage. The final step was clinical testing. I stared at the red vials, deep in thought. Human testing was risky. I needed someone reliable who could handle potential consequences. I decided to come clean to Edgar rather than risk discovery later. The potion was essentially a potent stimulant and healing agent. For the Schmidt family, this wasn't a world-shaking secret, but its success proved Conford's potential and could secure further investment. I found Edgar checking supply lists with more in the inner-city warehouse. "Mr. Edgar, may I have a word?" I asked. Sensing my gravity, Edgar excused himself and followed me to a quiet corner. "Mr. Edgar," I said, producing the vial, "I found a recipe for militia potion among the late Lord's papers. I've managed to brew it. It's said to boost spirit and accelerate healing, which could greatly benefit our troops." I added, "I'm unsure of its safety and wanted your advice." Edgar took the bottle without surprise. He inspected the color and clarity, then sniffed it, looking thoughtful. Without comment, he beckoned his young assistant, Mark. Mark approached respectfully. Edgar handed him the bottle, saying calmly, "Drink this." Mark drank it instantly, as if it were water. I was stunned, fearing the worst, but minutes later, Mark's face glowed with health. "Sir," Mark said, "it tastes strange, but I feel warm, less tired, and much more alert." His fatigue from moving supplies had vanished. Edgar nodded. "Good, go back to work." Mark saluted and left, full of energy. Edgar turned to me with a knowing, teasing smile. "Young master, wondering why I let him drink it?" I nodded. Edgar explained, "As a steward, I must know the properties and toxicity of common plants to ensure my master's safety." He pointed to the bottle. "Your ingredients, frost needle grass, icefield thistle root, rock lichen, are not lethal." I knew the mixture would likely be safe, even if ineffective, which is why I let Mark try it. Edgar's gaze deepened. "I knew you were gathering these materials. I was simply waiting for you to come to me." I was stunned. My secret experiments had been under his watch the entire time. Edgar's expression turned serious. "Master Carl, the Duke sent me to assess Conford's value and your potential, not to sabotage you." He leaned in. "You have talent and dedication, but working in secret is risky. A mistake could destroy everything you've built. From now on, treat me as your steward. I can coordinate resources and mitigate risks for you. I may not know everything, but my experience can help you. Trust me, I want to see you succeed. You don't have to carry everything alone." His words were a mix of sincerity and a proposal for deeper cooperation. Seeing the genuine look in his eyes, my guard lowered. I realized Edgar wasn't just a spy. He was a partner. Edgar's status in the Schmidt family depends on Conford's success. I realized that cooperating with my father's spy is far more beneficial than mutual suspicion. "I understand, Edgar," I said, smiling with relief. "Thank you for your trust. Let's discuss the mass production of the militia potion." Clearing the air with Edgar lifted a heavy weight off my shoulders. I recognized his administrative talent and pragmatism. He was an invaluable asset for resource management. I decided to delegate authority, allowing him to integrate into Conford's operations. Rather than treating him like a spy, I would show him everything to secure further support from my father, the Duke. I was confident I could maintain control while utilizing his skills. The militia potion was the perfect test of his loyalty and capability. I documented every step of the production process, from raw materials to bottling, including detailed flowcharts. I handed him this idiot-proof manual along with the necessary experimental equipment. Edgar, take charge of the production and optimization, I said. Coordinate directly with Scribe Mall for personnel and materials. No need to consult me for every detail. My only requirement is to maximize output and stability while ensuring safety. Edgar accepted the documents and equipment with an appreciative, wry smile. He enjoyed the autonomy and the weight of the responsibility I had placed upon him. Understood, my lord, Edgar promised. I will establish a dedicated alchemy workshop and strict production protocols immediately. I nodded, satisfied that his professionalism would far exceed my own amateur efforts. This freed me to focus on broader strategic issues. Currently, Conford faced a sweet problem, a rapidly growing population. The first phase of the new residential area was complete, offering sturdy stone-based housing far superior to the old semi-subterranean dwellings. The thriving fields were a beacon of prosperity. Word spread across the northern frontier that Conford offered food, work, and protection under a benevolent lord. Refugees arrived in increasing numbers, eventually moving in entire village groups. They were ragged, malnourished, and desperate. Having lost everything to bandits, Solonians, or monsters, they sought only survival and safety. Seeing our castle, healthy farmers, and disciplined soldiers, they knew they had found their sanctuary. A powerful lord was exactly what these refugees craved. I welcomed them all. With support from Count Rockefort and the Schmidt family, I had the resources to accommodate them. Population meant labor, soldiers, and the foundation of a prosperous territory. I implemented a work for relief policy. Newcomers must help with the second phase of construction and land reclamation in exchange for food and shelter. For those reclaiming land, 1/3 goes to me, while the rest is leased to them. After the harvest, half the yield is paid as rent, leaving the other half for the farmers. This generous policy greatly motivated the refugees. I also introduced a rent-to-own housing scheme for the new units at 30 copper coins a month. Once total rent equals construction costs, the family gains permanent usage rights, though I retain land ownership. This installment plan further fueled their enthusiasm. Edgar managed these policies with impressive efficiency. Morning arrived in the new residential area, signaled by the crowing of roosters. Marissa stepped out of her new wooden home, carrying a chamber pot. A stray dog scurried away as she emerged. The morning air was crisp and fresh. Other women emerged to perform their morning chores. The area was neatly planned with gravel paths and drainage ditches. It was a vast improvement over their former hovels. Marissa called her neighbor Erica. Erica, a former slave turned freeman for her sewing skills, had married the talented carpenter Elliot. They were a model couple in the new settlement. The two friends walked to the nearby creek to clean their pots. They scrubbed their buckets in the cold, clear water. Erica complained, "Elliot is never home. He's been reinforcing the flint mine, then working on the castle, and now the Lord has ordered all carpenters to build a dock at Amber Bay." She sighed. "He's obsessed with his blueprints, floating bridges, cranes. I don't understand any of it." Marissa empathized, touching her pregnant belly. "My Otto is the same. Farming all day, then militia training until dark. He comes home smelling of gunpowder and falls asleep instantly." They laughed, their frustrations fading. Erica softened, "But I'm happy. Being busy means Conford is thriving. If we were idle, that would be the real danger." She looked at Marissa's belly with envy. "It's wonderful that you're expecting." Marissa blushed happily and asked, "How about you and Elliot?" Erica blushed, looking down. "No news yet. He's always too exhausted from his work to think of anything else." Marissa teased me, suggesting I be more proactive with Elliot, the tech-focused craftsman. She advised me to bring him soup and keep him company while he works, noting that men like him need a spark to get moving. Erica blushed deeply, shyly pushing Marissa away in embarrassment. Yet, Erica's eyes flickered with interest, clearly considering the advice. After cleaning, they carried the chamber pots away. In the Conford workshop, I examined the flintlock musket, which reached nearly to my shoulder. Its walnut stock was polished smooth, while the dark, heavy iron barrel exuded a cold, lethal aura. I cocked the hammer and pulled the trigger. A sharp click followed as the flint struck the frizzen, showering sparks. A fine weapon, I praised, feeling the heavy, cold power of the barrel. I am neither a knight nor a mage, but now, I am a man armed with a musket. The prospect of piercing knightly armor and shattering magical barriers with lead and powder was thrilling. Hector the blacksmith took a swig of ale, wiped his bearded mouth, and exhaled contentedly. He cared little for wages, provided I kept him supplied with cheap ale. "Can we test it?" I asked, my eyes bright with anticipation. I was desperate to see its true power. Hector drank again before grunting. "Any time, my lord. The barrel is forged from the finest iron. It won't burst." He pointed to a box containing a 17.5 millimeters caliber design, a horn scoop for 6 grams of black powder, and cast lead balls. Flintlocks were already appearing in the kingdom's army and being smuggled by Solonians. I picked up a lead ball. It was heavy and surprisingly smooth. "Let's go outside." I grabbed the musket, and Hector followed with the supplies, leaving the sweltering workshop. We headed to the open wasteland used for weapon testing. Nearby militia and craftsmen gathered, curious to see the strange new long gun. Following Hector's instructions, I stood the musket upright. I poured a scoop of powder down the barrel and dropped in the lead ball. Using the ramrod, I packed the powder and ball firmly until I felt the resistance. I returned the ramrod, set the hammer to half-cock, primed the pan with fine powder, and closed the frizzen. Finally, I pulled the hammer to full cock with a crisp click. It took half a minute, slower than modern rifles, but far more reliable in bad weather than the common matchlock. I aimed at an old wooden barrel 50 paces away. I held my breath and pulled the trigger. Click, boom. The flint struck, the primer ignited, and the main charge exploded. A deafening roar erupted with a cloud of sulphurous white smoke. The recoil slammed into my shoulder, pushing me back and jerking the barrel upward. 50 paces away, the barrel was struck as if by a giant fist. It shattered into splinters and collapsed. The crowd cheered in shock at the weapon's terrifying power. I rubbed my numb shoulder, grinning. The power exceeded my expectations. It would easily punch through armor and devastate unarmored targets. "Excellent, Hector. You've done a great service," I declared. Hector chuckled, taking another drink, clearly proud. "However," I noted, pointing at the debris, "the loading is too slow, and the recoil is difficult to manage." I recall the kingdom using paper cartridges, combining powder and ball into one package. Biting open the top to pour the powder, and then loading the whole package would simplify the process. Also, we should reduce the caliber and weight for better portability. Finally, we need a bayonet with an iron ring to fit the barrel for close-quarters combat. Hector was stunned by my practical ideas and immediately agreed to start the redesign. I officially appointed Edgar as the Grand Steward of Conford. Maul remained the scribe, and Hans, who excelled at the flint mine, was promoted to treasurer. By keeping these roles in my inner circle, I limited Edgar's direct control over resources. I used Edgar for his administrative experience while remaining wary of his family ties. I couldn't hand over total power to an outsider. Regardless, under his efficient management, Conford's development accelerated. Edgar revolutionized the production of militia potion beyond my simple workshop methods. He selected 4 literate, quick-witted youths and trained them for 3 days. He focused on standardized procedures rather than complex chemistry. He broke down my manual into simple, repeatable steps with strict quality standards. He established a dedicated alchemy workshop in a ventilated stone room. He organized the space into distinct zones: raw materials, processing, reaction, cooling, and bottling. Through precise scheduling, he stabilized production at 50 bottles per month. Every bottle was labeled, dated, and personally inspected by him. This proto-industrial management ensured consistent quality far beyond typical local standards. The new residential area for Freeman had become chaotic. Edgar immediately stepped in to reorganize it. He used lime powder to mark out the land. He laid out straight, wide main roads and organized alleys. He clearly separated residential zones, workshops, markets, and public spaces. He added drainage ditches to prevent mud and enforced a strict public hygiene policy, banning open defecation. He built large, deep-pit public latrines on both sides of the area, maintained by dedicated cleaners using lime. This drastically improved sanitation, stopped the pollution of the river, and lowered the risk of disease. My third priority was solving the water supply issue. The castle spring was insufficient for the hundreds of people living below. Previously, residents relied on distant, unsafe streams. Edgar and the engineer, Ferry, surveyed nearby streams for quality and flow. Edgar selected a clear, stable stream from the north. He mobilized labor to build a diversion dam, raising the water level. Workers then constructed a mile-long aqueduct using stone channels and clay pipes. The system utilized gravity to deliver water to the highest point of the settlement. We built a massive stone reservoir there, lined with pebbles and sand for filtration. The reservoir featured multiple taps, with overflow directed to irrigate the fields. This month-long project drastically improved the residents' health and quality of life. Following the aqueduct, I upgraded the irrigation network. I organized labor during the off-season to overhaul the farmland irrigation. By clearing old channels and digging new ones, we created an efficient network that boosted crop yields. That evening, Edgar reported to me in the Lord's Hall. He presented a detailed report. 50 militia potions produced, settlement sanitation completed, the aqueduct finished, irrigation upgraded, and 137 new refugees settled. I felt deeply moved by his efficiency. These administrative burdens once crushed old Moore, whose age limited his energy. Edgar's management was far more meticulous, scientific, and efficient. While Moore remained our respected scribe, Edgar had naturally assumed the bulk of logistics and personnel management. Edgar proposed measures, which Moore and Hans reviewed before I gave final approval. Edgar handled implementation, while Moore and Hans managed resource allocation. Their collaboration was flawless. Edgar's plans were always reasonable. Seeing Edgar's bloodshot eyes, I said, "Mr. Edgar, your hard work is the reason Conford thrives. Putting you in charge was my best decision." Edgar bowed slightly, smiling with weary satisfaction. "It is my duty, my lord. Seeing this land flourish is my greatest reward." We shared a silent, mutual understanding. Old Moore felt a long-awaited sense of relief, having shed his administrative duties. He was finally free from the drudgery of population records and dispute mediation. He redirected his wisdom toward his true passion, engineering and fortifications. His focus shifted beyond the main castle. He knew Conford's defense required a layered system of outposts, trenches, and traps. The expansion of the settlement made rebuilding these defenses urgent. The goal wasn't to stop the Solen army, but to delay them and deplete their strength. We needed to buy time for civilians to retreat and weaken the enemy before the final stand. Moore accepted that the settlement and outposts would likely be destroyed in the coming war. But until then, he would maximize their strategic value. With my approval, Moore and his team surveyed the area. They planned a new defense network at key junctions and crossings. Reconstruction began with 3 critical watchtowers. These featured stone bases for fire and impact resistance. Above, 2-story wooden observation decks were erected. Topped with protective roofs, they stood 12 to 15 meters high. Each tower housed 3 to 5 sentries equipped with horns, signal fires, and muskets or bows. They served as early warning systems, taking 10 days each to construct. Moore also designed larger, sturdier outposts for main roads and mountain passes. These functioned as small, self-contained defensive strongholds. They housed 15 to 20 soldiers and featured stone bases with wooden upper levels. The platforms could support small catapults or archers. Trenches, check hedgehogs, and caltrops surrounded these outposts. They were designed to force the enemy to slow down or divert, buying us time. Each took about a month to build. Moore also deployed hidden anti-cavalry pits, tripwires, and log barriers in the woods. These simple traps would wreak havoc on charging cavalry. The area below the mountain became a massive construction site. Soldiers and craftsmen worked alongside civilians under Moore's direction. Moore was tireless, his eyes bright with purpose as he moved between sites. He constantly refined his designs and calculated material needs. Every completed tower or trench brought him immense satisfaction, despite the grim reality that they would likely be destroyed. He understood their mission: trading space for time and sacrifice for the safety of the main castle. Edgar and I stood on the castle wall, overlooking the vibrant scene below. The fields were lush, the settlement was bustling, and the new fortifications stood as silent guardians. "My lord," Edgar remarked with pride, "your management has far exceeded the Duke's expectations. I expect Franklin's next, larger investment will arrive soon. For him, our prosperity proved his worth to his family." I smiled, watching my territory. "It wouldn't be possible without your order and efficiency, Mr. Edgar." Just then, a convoy bearing the Count's banners appeared on the road below. A striking figure on horseback stood out among the supply caravan. I recognized the golden hair and upright posture instantly. "Oh," Edgar squinted. "The Count's daughter is here? That's rare." He glanced at me, his eyes probing. He had long suspected my close ties to the governor's family, especially Charlotte, and this seemed to confirm it. I was surprised by her arrival, yet felt a surge of excitement. We hadn't seen each other since Icewater Creek, over 2 months ago. "Let's go down," I said, ignoring Edgar's curiosity as I headed for the stairs. He followed, deep in thought. We reached the gate just as the caravan arrived. Charlotte dismounted gracefully. She approached with a bright smile. "Surprised?" "Indeed," I replied, keeping my tone measured with Edgar present. "I expected a letter first." "Letters are too slow," she waved a hand. "Besides, I wanted to surprise you. Is the castle finished? I'll be angry if it isn't." "It is," I said, gesturing to the fortress. "Come inside, if you don't mind the state of it." Charlotte laughed. "I'll see how your doghouse turned out." I led her in, leaving Edgar behind. He knew when to vanish while I was with my lady. He turned to the caravan leader, his professional mask firmly in place as he began managing the supplies. I led Charlotte into the main hall. It was spacious but austere, with bare stone walls and minimal furnishings compared to the luxury of the governor's mansion in France City. Charlotte seemed intrigued, inspecting the structure and touching the cold stone walls. "Sturdy," she noted. "Why did you really come?" I asked. "I wanted to," she countered, eyebrow raised. "Not welcome." "Of course you are," I denied. "But the road isn't safe. Did the Count allow this?" "Father approved," she said, walking toward a long table. "And he has a message for you." "What is it?" I pressed. She ignored me, tracing the polished table. "Is this where you hold meetings? Where are your quarters?" "Upstairs." She teased me with a sly smile. I followed her up the new wooden stairs, which creaked under our weight. Her tone turned formal. "The Solonians will head south by August or September. We can't just wait for them. We need to track their movements and cause trouble. Father is already gathering men in France City." She stopped and looked at me. "He's chosen one of the northern frontier lords for a scout mission." "Guess who?" I waited in silence. "You're boring," she pouted, pointing at me. "It's you. You've been chosen for the Count's scout unit. Father has invested heavily in you. Surely you won't refuse." "Of course not," I replied immediately. "I'm happy to help, and it's for the safety of Conford as well." "Good," she said, then added casually, "Oh, Father sent the heads of the 22 Solonians we killed to the royal capital. The king was pleased and sent rewards." She looked at me meaningfully. "But Father knows the vultures at court. He didn't mention your name to avoid unwanted attention. The credit is temporarily mine. You don't mind, do you?" I understood the Count's intent instantly. If the court knew the useless Schmidt's son had established himself and was working with the governor to kill Solonians, it would invite suspicion and suppression. This concealment was a form of protection. It was a shield. "I don't mind at all," I said sincerely. "You've helped me enough, and the Count's supplies are generous." I understand his caution. Seeing my genuine reaction, she smiled with relief. She moved on, inspecting the study and bedroom like a general, praising the lighting and the furniture. I followed, explaining the layout. Soon, noise drifted up from below. From the window, I saw Edgar directing the serfs in unloading the final supplies. The caravan was preparing to depart. I turned back to find Charlotte still there, examining my inkwell. "The caravan is leaving," I asked. "Aren't you going back with them?" She looked up and winked. Clearing her throat, she mimicked her father's stern tone. "Lord Karl von Schmidt, hear this. Given your weak forces and the lack of high-tier combatants besides Knight Roland, The governor orders Tier 2 Knight Charlotte Rockefort to assist in your defense until the mission concludes. She is under your command. Use her well." She laughed, then turned serious. "It's not just me running away. I'm here on official orders. I'm staying for a while." I realized the truth. This wasn't the Count's order, but Charlotte's own initiative to be in Conford. I nodded solemnly. "You are most welcome, Knight Charlotte. Conford needs your strength. I'll have Edgar prepare your quarters." She raised an eyebrow. "Can't I stay in your castle?" I blinked, then nodded. "Of course. There are 2 rooms upstairs." I joked, "Though if you don't mind, you could share my bed, even if it is a bit hard." "In your dreams," she laughed. "I want to see what you've done with my father's investment." I looked outside. Now, the serfs are still working. I didn't want to parade such a prominent, beautiful woman around just yet. "Think I'm a burden?" she teased. "Not at all," I sighed, knowing I couldn't refuse. "Fine, let's go." We headed down to find Edgar in the courtyard, focused on his ledger. Charlotte glanced at him and whispered, "Is that the butler your father sent to assist you? To keep an eye on you?" "It is him," I replied directly. Charlotte looked puzzled. "Then why keep him? Why let him touch core affairs?" "We are using each other," I said, watching Edgar walk away. "He is capable. Conford's accounts and logistics are in perfect order. Besides, the better this place develops, the more credit he gains with his family. We are in the same boat, for now." Charlotte nodded, warning me, "Be careful. He is deep. Don't be fooled by appearances. Your father is still eyeing this treasure you've unearthed." I turned to her, smiling. "Many are eyeing my treasure. Isn't your father one of them? And you, aren't you?" We walked out of the castle along the new mountain path. Below, the civilian district and farmlands were thriving. The subjects stopped to greet me with simple, respectful smiles. "Your subjects truly love you, Lord Carl," Charlotte remarked with genuine admiration. "I just did what was necessary." "Sincerity earns sincerity," I replied, scanning the new houses and crops. Charlotte suddenly asked, "What did you mean earlier about me eyeing Conford?" I countered, "Isn't it true? Why else would you be so eager to stay in my castle? Just to help with defense." She slowed her pace, her golden hair catching the sunlight. Her playful expression faded. "You are blunt. My father thinks this place could be a vital anchor against the Solonians. He wants me to see how you achieve this, and if you can meet his expectations." "Is that eyeing you?" "It is," I nodded. "A reasonable motive." "And you? Are you just following orders?" Charlotte blushed and didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the training soldiers. "I just find this place more interesting than France City. I wanted to see it for myself." She looked at me, her eyes bright. "I also want to know how a man without knightly or magical talent makes so many people follow him in this wasteland." After the inspection, I gathered Conford's core members in the Lord's Hall. The hall was simple but solemn. I sat at the head. To my left were the civil officials led by Scribe Old Moore and Steward Edgar. To my right were the military officers led by Old Knight Brendan, including Richter and Roland. With recent refugees, our garrison had reached 230 men. We added a platoon of combat soldiers and 2 of militia. Roland was appointed commander of the 3rd Combat Platoon. At the end of the military line sat Charlotte Rockefort in her uniform. Everyone knew her connection to me and said nothing. I cleared my throat. Charlotte brings word. Count Rockefort is forming a Northern Frontier Scout unit to monitor the Solonians. We are ordered to participate. I looked at the officers. This is vital. We will form a 20 to 30-man cavalry scout unit from our best riders. Roland, your platoon will contribute. Prepare horses and supplies immediately. They saluted. I turned to Edgar. "Steward, report." Edgar stepped forward. "Operations are normal. We have 50,000 gene of grain, with 30,000 more coming. We can survive a winter siege." He paused. "Population is 800. Some suggest expanding the housing district, but I advise against it." "Why?" I asked. "The base of the mountain is indefensible. New houses outside the castle's protection would be the first targets. We'd lose our investment. I suggest pausing permanent construction. For the next 4 months, we should dig semi-underground shelters for the new arrivals to survive the winter." I nodded. "Agreed. Prioritize survival and defense." Old Moore reported. "The castle defenses are complete. Watchtowers and small forts are repaired. We have a tiered retreat plan to stall the Solonians at every step. Excellent, I said. Edgar, coordinate the supplies. More, refine the defenses. Dismissed. Only Charlotte remained. She stretched, smiling. You look quite the part. I thought I was at a royal council. Your Majesty? I laughed. Keep your voice down. Let me show you your room. I led her to a room across from my master bedroom. It's simple but clean. It contained a bed, wardrobe, table, and chair. The evening breeze blew in, fresh and cool. Charlotte walked in and sat on the bed to test it. Better than a tent, she said, patting the spot beside her. I hesitated, then sat. The bed creaked. We sat in silence, the atmosphere shifting. The sunset bathed the room in gold, softening her features. The fatigue of the journey and the tension of the meeting seemed to melt away. Her head rested on my shoulder. I stiffened, then relaxed. Carl, she asked, who will lead the scouts? I pondered. I don't have a dedicated cavalry commander yet. It requires someone strong. Perhaps I will lead, with Roland assisting. Why do you ask? She looked at me. Let me do it. Let me command the scouts. I was stunned. You? Then what about me? I'd be your subordinate. She shook her head. Stay in the castle. You lack cavalry experience and tactical training. You can barely ride, Carl. You can't command a cavalry charge. Her words were harsh, but true. I had never excelled at mounted combat, and Conford offered no chance to learn. Charlotte, however, was a knight and the cavalry captain of France City. Carl, she urged, you are too important to Conford. Don't leave the castle or lead soldiers into battle unless necessary. Charlotte took my hand and confessed. This is why I came to Cranford. I don't want you to risk your life. Please, trust me. Just as I trusted you before, can we do that? I replied. By evening, the veteran knight Brendan arrived to report. My lord, Brendan said steadily, the scout unit is selected. 21 men from our 3 combat soldier platoons, all fit and brave and all mounted. He paused. However, most are riding travel horses, not war horses. Aside from Knight Roland and a few others, most can barely stay in the saddle. They'll have to dismount to fight. A thought struck me, inspired by the French dragoons and hussars I knew of, soldiers who fought from horseback using sabers and muskets. Brendan, I mused. Perhaps we don't need them to charge like traditional knights. I have an idea. I explained. What if we equip them with muskets? They don't need expert horsemanship, just the ability to move quickly. They can fire from the saddle, retreat to reload, and harass the enemy like a wolf pack instead of engaging in melee. Brendan's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He had never heard of such tactics. He stroked his beard, considering. Firing from horseback? It sounds strange, but it's feasible. It's certainly better than charging the Soren barbarians' spears on these nags. It's a unique idea, my lord. I'll check the armory for muskets and have them practice firing and reloading while mounted immediately. The old knight's tone shifted from skepticism to excitement as he hurried off. Soon after, Edgar arrived with a meticulous list of supplies for the scouts. 20 days' worth of hard bread, dried meat, and horse feed for 25 men were already packed. With the chores finished, night fell. I ordered a servant to bring hot water to the second floor. I rarely requested such luxuries, usually bathing with the men. But Charlotte was here. Steam filled the room as the wooden tub was filled. Charlotte followed the steam, smiling. Thoughtful of you, Lord Carl, knowing I've been traveling. She naturally kicked off her muddy boots and socks, standing barefoot on the cool floor. She unbuttoned her coat, tossed it to me, and pulled out her hairpins, letting her golden hair cascade down. She glanced at me, eyes teasing. What? Are you planning to bathe with me? I took her warm clothes, my throat tightening, but kept a calm face. If you don't mind, I'd be happy to. Charlotte chuckled, holding the door handle open. Then come in. I took a step forward, heart racing. Just as I reached the door, she slammed it shut, nearly hitting my nose. In your dreams, she laughed from behind the door. I shook my head, smiling, as I heard the sounds of her bathing. Standing there, I could easily imagine the scene, feeling a sudden, restless heat. I took a deep breath, picked up her discarded boots, and walked away. Inside, Charlotte soaked in the warm water, smiling at her successful prank. She knew me well. I liked to tease, but I was too restrained to actually barge in, and she loved seeing me flustered. The servant soon brought dinner: fresh bread, stewed peas and tomato sauce, smoked fish, meat, and a bottle of dark ale. I rarely drank, but the servant noted. "My lord, Steward Edgar insisted on this. He said, you might need it." I realized Edgar's excessive attention to detail. I smiled and placed the meal on the table in the small upstairs parlor. As the servant left, the heavy castle doors closed. The fortress fell silent, save for the crackling fireplace and the wind outside. It felt as if only Charlotte and I remained. Charlotte called out from the bathroom. "Carl, are you there?" I walked over. "What is it?" "A favor," she said through the water's echo. "Could you get my change of clothes from my brown leather bag?" Of course. I quickly found the bag in her room. Inside were neatly folded linens and shorts. I knocked on the bathroom door. I heard her stand up in the tub. The door cracked open, releasing a wave of hot, fragrant steam. "Give them here," she said. I stiffly passed the clothes through the gap. A wet, glowing arm reached out, her fingertips brushing mine with a warm, damp touch. "Thanks." She shut the door. I stood there for a moment before heading back to the table. I poured the ale into 2 wooden cups and waited. Soon, Charlotte appeared, drying her golden hair with a towel. She wore the casual clothes, looking soft and relaxed, the sharpness of her armor gone. I watched her approach, the candlelight dancing on her damp face, and felt a moment of distraction. This wasn't Friend City. This was my castle, my home. Seeing her here, moving toward the table, stirred a strange, profound feeling in me. It felt as though she belonged here, as if she were my wife. "I'm starving," she said, sitting opposite me. "I smelled this from downstairs. These peas look great." "Just simple fare," I said, pushing a cup toward her. "Not like the governor's mansion." She dipped bread into the peas, smiling. "I'm no pampered noble. Hard bread and cold water are standard for me. This is a feast." She took a sip of ale, eyes widening. "This is good. Did you prepare this?" "Edgar did," I replied. She looked at me meaningfully. "Your steward is terrifyingly thoughtful." She glanced around the hall. "Honestly, Carl, you've managed this place better than my father expected. He thought you'd just hold the castle, not expand down the mountain." "Survival, that's all," I said. "It's more than that," she said earnestly. "It's a sense of security. People say Cranford is the only new territory in the northern frontier to hold its ground. Merchants are even starting to detour here, feeling safer in your shadow." I met her gaze, her blue eyes clear in the candlelight. "That's important news. I'll have to consider formalizing ties with them," I said, raising my cup. "But for tonight, let's leave that aside. Welcome, Charlotte." Charlotte raised her glass, smiling softly. "Thank you for your hospitality, Carl, and for your trust." After dinner, we retired for the night. In the flickering candlelight of the corridor, Charlotte paused at her door, her hand lingering on the knob. She turned, leaning against the frame, and looked at me with a playful, enigmatic smile. "Carl," she drawled, "why not sleep together? I'm a bit afraid in this strange castle." I stopped, recognizing the familiar glint in her eyes. "You won't trick me twice, Charlotte." I turned to leave, but she didn't retort. Instead, her playfulness faded, replaced by a complex, somber expression. She leaned against the doorframe, the soft candlelight highlighting her silhouette. "Carl," she whispered, her voice lower, "I'm serious this time." Her usual facade of lightheartedness was gone, replaced by a vulnerability I had never seen before. My heart raced, and I found myself walking toward her. I stood close enough to see the candlelight reflected in her trembling eyelashes. I could feel the warmth of her breath. As I reached the threshold, she pressed a hand against my chest, stopping me. Her palm was warm, and I felt the subtle pressure of her fingertips through my clothes. "Carl," she looked into my eyes, "do you love me?" The sudden question caught me off guard, gripping my heart. I answered instinctively, "Of course. I want to marry you. I want to." She silenced me. Her slender finger pressed against my lips, cutting off my promise. "Don't rush, Carl," she said, her eyes filled with both affection and sobering concern. "We are young, and the road ahead is long. I love you too, but the reality is too harsh. You know that better than anyone, don't you?" I fell silent. She was right. A union between Duke Schmidt's neglected son and the daughter of Count Rockefort, who held real power in the northern frontier. Regardless of our love, it would be viewed as a political alliance. The king in the royal capital would never tolerate such a consolidation of power between two major noble houses. The resulting suspicion and conflict would destroy everything we had. She saw the realization in my eyes. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around my neck and resting her head on my shoulder. Her warm breath against my ear carried a scent of soap and a trace of melancholy. "Carl," she whispered with fierce resolve, "I need you and Conford to grow strong. Strong enough that no one, not the king, not our families, can ever stand in our way again." She pulled back slightly, staring into my eyes. "Promise me you'll do it." "I promise," I replied, my voice firm. No man could refuse such a request from the woman he intended to spend his life with. It was more than a promise. It was a heavy responsibility and a powerful catalyst. Charlotte seemed relieved. She leaned back against my shoulder, closing her eyes to draw strength from our embrace. I tightened my arms around her, feeling the resilience in her frame. We stood in silence, listening to each other's heartbeats, sealing our pact without further words. Finally, she pulled away. "I should sleep," she said, her tone lingering. She leaned in and pressed a soft, fleeting kiss to my cheek. "Good night, Carl." Before I could react, she stepped back and closed the door. I touched my cheek, where the warmth of her kiss still lingered. I inhaled, the scent of her hair still hanging in the air. Back in my room, I leaned against the door before lying down. Sleep would not come. The sensation of her embrace and the scent of her remained vivid. Her words and her expectant blue eyes echoed in my mind. Strong enough that no one can stand in our way. A surge of unprecedented power washed away my fatigue. My blood raced with purpose. I sat up, staring into the darkness, my gaze piercing through the ceiling toward the future. I clenched my fist, making a silent vow. Conford would not be a mere refuge. It would be my foundation. I would turn it into the strongest fortress in the northern frontier, build a powerful army, defeat the Solonians, and bring order. I would rise until I could stand beside Charlotte without fear, make my mother proud, and leave my mark on this world. I, a soul from another world once deemed worthless, would carve my legacy here. Ambition burned like wildfire in my eyes. By the next day, we buried our conversation, returning to our usual routines. We focused entirely on the new musket cavalry unit. I appointed Charlotte as the commander of the scout unit, with Roland as her deputy. While the soldiers respected my leadership, they were skeptical of Charlotte. Most had never fought alongside her and held deep-seated prejudices against a female commander. On the training ground, Charlotte watched the men struggle with their muskets on horseback, clearly doubting the efficacy of the tactic. "Firing from horseback?" she scoffed. "The recoil and movement make accuracy a matter of luck." I gestured toward the field. "Then show us how a true knight does it." Charlotte smiled, grabbed her longbow, and mounted her horse. She moved with effortless grace. At a full gallop, she drew her bow. Thwip! An arrow struck the chest of a target dozens of meters away. 2 more shots followed, hitting the head and throat with perfect precision. The display of skill left the soldiers in awe. Even Brendan nodded in approval. I smiled at Roland. I had intended for this to prove Charlotte's worth. In the military, strength earns respect, regardless of gender. Though still skeptical of the muskets, Charlotte began training with them, working harder and more rigorously than anyone else. Charlotte's superior horsemanship allowed her to quickly master firing muskets while mounted. Under her guidance, our 20-man squad learned to reload, aim, and volley fire while galloping within a week. Though their accuracy remained poor, their formation and momentum were impressive. Training concluded when Count Rockefort's messenger arrived at Cranford with orders. The main scout force had gathered at Icewater Creek. We were ordered to depart immediately. Charlotte led the musketeer cavalry, equipped with ammunition and 10 days of rations, to set out. I went to the castle gate to see them off. I saluted Charlotte solemnly. "Charlotte, Roland, the mission is in your hands. Stay safe. I await your report." "We shall not fail," Charlotte replied, returning the salute with a sharp, confident gaze. Edgar added calmly, "Knights, please take care. Cranford needs you back." Without further ceremony, Charlotte signaled, "Move out." The squad of 20 rode out in 2 columns, their hoofbeats echoing through the mountains. Subjects waved as they passed, and I watched until they vanished into the wilderness. Edgar asked anxiously, "My lord, can they handle this? They aren't regular cavalry." I patted his shoulder. "I'm no cavalry commander either, but Charlotte and Roland are our best bet. We must trust them." Edgar nodded, clearly impressed. He realized I was a leader who delegated to experts and acknowledged my own limitations. 2 days later, Charlotte reached the rendezvous at Icewater Creek. A force of 80 cavalrymen and over 100 horses awaited. Charlotte's arrival drew immediate attention. She dismounted and approached the young officer in charge, Roland following. "Commander, I am Charlotte Rockefort, reporting for duty under orders from the Count and the Lord of Cranford." The officer looked her over with surprise and scrutiny. He smirked. "A female knight? I heard of the governor's daughter, but I didn't expect you to lead Cranford's troops." He extended a hand. "I am Leon von Hoek, commander of this operation. Welcome." They shook hands briefly. Leon glanced at our musketeers. "Interesting equipment you've brought." His adjutant and men watched with curiosity and suspicion. A female commander with novel weapons stood out in this traditional unit. Ignoring his skepticism, Charlotte replied, "Cranford's troops are ready for deployment." Her tone was crisp and professional. Leon nodded. "Very well. Your camp is on the east side of the creek." Charlotte signaled Roland to set up camp. She stayed behind to discuss the intelligence and sector assignments with Leon's adjutant. Charlotte cut straight to the point. "Leon, what are our specific orders?" Leon, seemingly impressed by her pragmatism, dropped his arrogance. He pointed to a mountainous region on the map. "The Solonians prefer mobility over sieges. They often strike through the Blackstone Pass." He traced the map. "Eisenberg is responsible for the pass, led by Friedrich von Schmidt." Charlotte's brow twitched at the name. She wondered if this Schmidt was related to me, but she remained composed. Leon continued, "We cover the area from the pass east to the forests north of France City. Our mission is to scout for Solonian infiltrators, determine their numbers, and report back. Harass small groups, but do not engage large forces. Report and retreat, do not get bogged down." "Understood," Charlotte replied. The next morning, the force split up. Charlotte's squad was assigned the area near the abandoned town of Ashbourne. The terrain was rugged and lacked proper roads. Charlotte knew her squad's limitations. Their horses were weak and their muskets were better for ambushes than mobile warfare. Open terrain would be fatal against Solonian elites. She ordered them to stick to dense forests and hilly terrain. Everyone was on high alert. "It's like fishing in the dark," Roland whispered. "Who knows what we'll find? Keep your eyes open, Roland." "Our advantage is detection, not combat," Charlotte warned. Roland nodded, respecting her superior skill. He knew her Tier 2 knight status was far more substantial than his own. Suddenly, the scout signaled a halt. Charlotte dismounted and crept forward with Roland. They hid behind brush and trees. Using binoculars, Charlotte observed the valley below. The hills were bare, but the valley floor was lush. 7 or 8 skin tents stood there, with hundreds of cattle and guards patrolling nearby. Charlotte recognized the riders' attire. Not Solonian, but Skarn. "Skarn people," she whispered, handing the binoculars to Roland. The Skarn were nomadic mercenaries, now Solonian vassals. They had once served the Plantagenet kingdom. Since the Battle of Grey Wolf Forest 7 years ago, most had defected to the Solonian hegemony. The Cavalry Legion, one of Solen's 8 major corps, is composed almost entirely of Skarn people. They hold a higher status than the enslaved Plantagenets within the Solen hierarchy, and their ferocity in battle rivals that of the Solonians themselves as they seek status and merit. This peaceful valley camp suggests the original Plantagenet inhabitants were long ago purged. "What do you say, Knight Charlotte?" I asked in a low voice, my eyes sharp. "Shall we strike?" "There are at most 20 combat-ready cavalrymen. The rest are women and children." A cautious veteran beside me whispered, "My lord, should we send a scout to inform Commander Leon? Bringing more men would be safer." I immediately countered, "By the time Leon arrives, we'll be discovered. The Skarn are as alert as foxes. They'll either flee or call for reinforcements." Both turned their gazes to Charlotte, awaiting her decision. Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She raised her binoculars, scanning the camp layout, livestock, and sentries, calculating rapidly. Seconds later, she made her choice. Attack, she said firmly. But no prolonged engagement. Roland, take the musket cavalry to ambush the valley exit. I don't need a charge. I need the threat and smoke to trap them inside. Charlotte quickly sketched the terrain and enemy positions on the ground with stones. I'll lead the main cavalry to strike from the front, using bows and muskets to neutralize the sentries. They are more mobile, but they won't abandon their livestock and families to pursue us, giving us the chance to annihilate them. As an experienced warrior, I understood the tactic immediately. I nodded heavily. Understood, Knight Charlotte. Move, she commanded. I took 3 musketeers, and the 4 of us silently turned our horses, circling toward the rear of the valley under the cover of trees. Charlotte took a deep breath, a cold light in her blue eyes. She mounted her horse and signaled the remaining 17 riders. We waited at the forest edge like a drawn bowstring. The scarred sentries on the ridge patrolled vigilantly, oblivious to the movement deep in the woods. Seeing my group disappear, Charlotte's eyes flashed. She spurred her horse. Follow me. She charged out of the tree line like an arrow, the rest of us shouting as we followed. Charlotte rode with incredible stability, gripping the horse with her legs while drawing her heavy bow. Knocking and drawing, her movements were fluid despite the galloping pace. A scarred rider barely turned before an arrow pierced his throat, pinning him to the ground. Charlotte didn't pause, locking onto her next target. Another arrow flew, and a second sentry fell. Her horse archery was flawless, clearing a path for our assault. The women panicked, but with nomadic instinct, they grabbed their children and fled toward the back of the camp on bareback horses. Charlotte ignored the noncombatants. The scarred riders on the ridge reacted quickly, roaring as they charged down the slope. With scimitars flashing and bows drawn, Charlotte signaled us to halt. About 8 scarred riders charged, firing arrows as they approached. Their range was limited. Most arrows fell harmlessly short. Charlotte and the musketeers aimed silently, waiting for the optimal range. 60 meters, 50. Fire, Charlotte commanded. Bang, bang, bang. A volley erupted, filling the air with white smoke. The flintlock muskets proved devastating. The 2 lead scarred riders exploded in blood and fell. 3 more horses were hit, throwing their riders. The charge collapsed instantly. The survivors, stunned by the thunderous firepower, reined in their horses, terrified by the smoke and their fallen comrades. Dismount and spread out. Secure the tents. Charlotte's voice cut through the chaos. We dismounted, using the Solen tents as cover to provide musket fire and mop up the resistance. The remaining scarred riders hovered at a distance, torn between retreat and their precious livestock. They were trapped in a dilemma: fear of our thunderous weapons versus the loss of their winter livelihood. Charlotte knew that losing their livestock meant ruin for this small scarred tribe. As they hesitated, sudden gunfire erupted from the valley exit behind them. Then came the sound of horses and shouts. My flanking party had arrived. Our allies are here, Charlotte shouted. Mount up. We 17 musketeers remounted with practiced speed. The initial tension was replaced by the adrenaline of our first victory. The scarred in the valley were in total disarray. Faced with deadly archers at the front and their retreat cut off, their will to fight shattered. The remaining riders abandoned their livestock and fled in every direction, desperate to escape the valley of death. Pursue, Charlotte ordered, directing us toward those trying to break through the front. I held the northern exit, following her orders to avoid rushing into the chaotic center. Like an invisible net, I waited for the panicked fish to hit my line. I calmly directed my men to pick off those trying to break through, forcing them back toward Charlotte's main force. Charlotte noticed a scarred leader attempting to rally his men toward the north exit. He was an expert rider, and Charlotte pursued him relentlessly. To her surprise, as she approached his flank, the rider twisted in his saddle to fire an arrow with impossible grace. He was a rare, ambidextrous elite. The arrow whistled toward Charlotte, sealing off her escape. But Charlotte was faster. Anticipating the move, she leaned low against her horse's neck. A classic cavalry dodge, hiding in the stirrups. The arrow grazed her shoulder armor, sparking. Charlotte's fury ignited. As the enemy recovered from his shot, Charlotte released her own arrow, guided by instinct and prediction. Thwack! Her arrow struck the Scarn rider's horse. The horse screamed and tumbled, throwing the rider hard onto the grass. Charlotte reined in her horse, which reared up with a neigh. She locked eyes with the fallen Scarn rider as he struggled to rise. Charlotte dropped her bow and drew her saber, the blade gleaming in the cold northern light. She turned her horse, saber lowered, and spurred toward the dismounted enemy. She charged. The Scarn man's face turned pale with despair. He barely drew his scimitar before Charlotte swept past him like a gust of wind. The fight was over. I watched Charlotte swing her saber with steady precision, the blade flashing like lightning to sever her opponent's neck. The enemy's head flew off, frozen in shock, as blood sprayed from the stump before the headless corpse collapsed heavily. Charlotte reined in her horse, her chest heaving slightly as she glared coldly at the fallen body. She flicked the blood from her blade onto the withered grass and scanned the battlefield. The skirmish was nearly over. Roland's musketeers had flanked the enemy, coordinating with our cavalry to mop up the survivors. The demoralized Scarn people were either cut down or forced to surrender. The valley, once chaotic, now echoed only with the groans of the wounded and the heavy breathing of the victors. Roland rode up to Charlotte, his musket barrel still trailing thin wisps of smoke. He glanced at the decapitated corpse, then at Charlotte, his eyes reflecting a flicker of awe at her composure. "Knight Charlotte," Roland reported. "The area is clear. We've won, and the cost was minimal." Charlotte nodded sharply. "Clean the battlefield immediately. Roland, take 2 of our fastest riders and report our success to Commander Leon." Our losses were light. Only 2 men struck by stray arrows, neither wound fatal. Charlotte administered the militia potion produced in Conford to the injured and carefully bandaged them. The potion worked quickly, and color returned to their faces. We replaced our spooked mounts with captured Scarn horses, though the 100 stray cattle remained a logistical headache. Soon, dust rose on the horizon as Leon arrived with his main scout unit. Seeing the battle finished and the massive herd of livestock, Leon's face betrayed his shock. So fast, and such a haul. Leon rode to Charlotte, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Excellent work, Knight Charlotte. This is a windfall that guarantees our mission's success." He waved his men forward, shouting, "Quick, count them and drive them out. We're retreating immediately." Charlotte frowned, stepping forward firmly. "Commander Leon, our priority is scouting the Solen main force, not looting." Leon dismissed her concern with a wave. "Rules are flexible. Who will complain when we bring back such a blow to the enemy's logistics?" "That is exactly my concern," Charlotte replied, her voice dropping. 100 head of cattle is a winter lifeline for a tribe. They wouldn't leave this unguarded unless a powerful Solen force was nearby. She gestured to the slow-moving herd. "This isn't a prize, it's a beacon. We're painting a target on our backs for the Solen cavalry." Leon's excitement waned as Charlotte's cold logic doused his fervor. He realized she was right. Moving slowly through enemy territory with this herd was like carrying a torch in the dark. Yet, as he looked at the wealth and potential glory the cattle represented, his greed flared up again. He had braved the northern frontier to escape the shadow of his family's decline and earn status through military merit. He couldn't abandon such an easy victory. Danger and opportunity were 2 sides of the same coin. After a moment of internal struggle, his desire for glory overrode his judgment. "I understand your concern," Leon said firmly, "but these cattle are vital for our winter defenses. We cannot abandon them." Seeing his greed, Charlotte proposed a compromise. "If we must deny the Solonians these resources without risking our lives, we should slaughter them here. It's a waste, but it ensures our safety." "Absolutely not." Leon snapped, his fists clenched. "These are hard-won spoils. We aren't destroying them." "Commander Leon," Charlotte's voice sharpened, "we are over 200 kilometers from safety. These animals will slow us to a crawl. We'll be strung out and vulnerable. If the Solen cavalry catches us, we'll all die. I know the risks." Leon interrupted, his face darkening with irritation. "I am the commander. Knight Charlotte Rockefort, you will obey my orders. Organize your men to drive the herd. We are leaving." He glared at her. "Even if you are the Count's daughter, you will not defy my military orders." The cold command weighed heavily on Charlotte. She saw the glint of obsession in his eyes and knew further reasoning was useless. She gripped her reins, suppressed her frustration, and gave him a sharp, icy look before turning her horse away. "As you command, Commander," she replied coldly, riding back to her unit. Charlotte returned to the site of the skirmish. She dismounted and spotted her long-time bow lying on the ground. Picking it up, her heart sank. The string had snapped during the fight. It felt like an omen, fueling her anger at Leon's stubbornness. She gripped the broken bow until her knuckles turned white. Away from the walls of France City and the safety of Conford, she felt exposed. Without her father's protection or the comfort of my own strategic planning, the northern frontier's wind felt biting, and the weight of responsibility pressed solely upon her. Every decision now carried the lives of 20 men. Every error could lead to ruin. Unlike serving under her father or consulting with me, she was now the one ultimately responsible, and she was saddled with a greedy fool leading them toward a death trap. The helplessness of being unable to override his command was suffocating. She felt like a passenger on a carriage hurtling toward a cliff, unable to grab the reins. She wished I were there. I was more assertive and cared little for rigid rules. My obsessive need for control would have been an asset here. If I were in charge, I wouldn't have wasted time trying to convince a fool. She could imagine my reaction. I would look at Leon with cold, unreadable eyes and dismantle his plan's flaws. If he remained stubborn, I would likely defy him outright, possessing the ruthlessness to do what was necessary. I demanded control and would never allow a fool to lead me to my death. But she couldn't. She realized with a bitter smile that I could act that way because I was Karl von Schmidt, a pioneer lord who had built his own path. She, however, carried the name Rochefort. Her actions reflected on her father and her family's reputation. Openly defying a superior officer, regardless of the outcome, was a fundamental breach of military law. I am bound by invisible threads of family, status, and upbringing, unlike Karl, who acts with such reckless freedom. These are the intangible shackles of my heritage. While I can argue and push boundaries, I struggle to take that final, decisive step into rebellion. This stifling constraint weighs heavily on me. I take a deep breath, suppressing my turbulent emotions. Roland approaches, his tone solemn. "Knight Charlotte, the wounded are settled, and the men are ready for your orders." He lowers his voice. "Whatever you decide, the men of Cranford and I will follow." His loyalty steadies my wavering resolve. I set aside the bow I was holding, placing it by my saddle, and pick up a Scarn horse bow instead. I look at my soldiers, who still gaze at me with trust despite the recent battle. Many were trained with Karl's resources, and he entrusted both them and this mission to me. An immense sense of responsibility washes over me, crushing my anxiety. Karl is not here, but I am, and he trusts me with his life's work. I must bring them back, every single one, to honor that trust. Anger and anxiety are useless. I need a clear head and swift action. My eyes sharpen, all hesitation replaced by the cold resolve of a commander in adversity. "Roland." "Here, knight." My voice is steady. "Let's figure out how to lead this group of donkeys out of this mire." In the northern part of Frostgard, unlike the desolate frontier, the shanty town is bustling. Smoke rises from countless makeshift furnaces used for forging weapons. The air reeks of coal and hammered metal, filled with the constant, dull thud of smithing. This is the Solen smithing district, where captured Plantagenet civilians toil daily to repair Solen armor and weapons. They are rewarded only with meager rations and a fragile sense of safety. Frostgard, once the Plantagenet kingdom's last stronghold in the north, fell to the Solonians 4 years ago. Its loss signaled the collapse of Plantagenet control over the northern frontier. Since then, the kingdom has retreated to defensive positions like France City, Blackstone Pass, and Wharton's Castle. A Black Wolf banner moves along the road outside Frostgard, followed by elite Solen cavalry. Plantagenet slaves and commoners alike kneel in terror as the banner passes. Harold sits atop a black horse, ignoring the prostrate crowd. He is a tall, weather-beaten man with the cold, sharp gaze of a predator. Last year's raids exceeded all expectations. We seized vast wealth and over 10,000 Plantagenet captives, who now fill our labor shortages. This victory has brought Harold to the peak of his power. He is even considering declaring himself emperor here, transforming the tribal alliance into a true empire. His only annoyance is the Plantagenet king's recent dispatch of pioneer nobles to the north. He expected them to be cannon fodder, yet they managed a small victory at Icewater Creek. They wiped out a small unit of the Sword Legion, killing 30 men and taking their heads. The king's propaganda regarding this incident is an insult, though last year remained profitable. Now, a new raiding season approaches, promising more wealth. The procession enters the city gates. As Harold heads toward the Lord's Hall, now his headquarters, riders arrive from outside, carrying a wounded man. They dismount and salute. The wounded man is a Scarn, his leather armor shredded and back pierced by broken arrows. "Great leader," the lead rider reports in a panic. "A Plantagenet cavalry unit attacked our temporary pasture in the Black Forest Valley yesterday. There were 20 or 30 of them, using muskets that thunder and smoke. There was a woman, a horse archer. She moved like the wind and shot with demonic accuracy. Our men were killed from afar before they could even close the distance." He gulps. "They flanked us, scattered the Scarn guards, and stole hundreds of our cattle and sheep." Harold's face remains calm, though his eyes glint with calculation. Those livestock were meant for the cavalry legion preparing to attack Blackstone Pass. It seems the enemy scouts were bolder than expected. He recalls Thorstein, the former Sword Legion commander demoted after the Icewater Creek defeat. His vanguard battalion is currently stationed near Frostguard. "Where is Thorstein and his vanguard battalion?" Harold asks calmly. "At the southern camp, leader." "Good," Harold says coldly. "Order Thorstein to lead his cavalry and hunt down these Plantagenet rats. Tell him this is his chance to redeem himself. He must recover every head of livestock and bring me the heads of every Plantagenet. If he fails, he knows the consequences." The messenger departs. Harold watches him, deep in thought. Sending Thorstein serves to discipline the arrogant cavalry legion while testing the enemy's strength and balancing the power between his 8 legions. It also bolsters the loyal, albeit weaker, Sword Legion. The column moves slowly across the wilderness, the 100-plus cattle dragging the pace to a crawl. I ride in the middle, watching the agonizingly slow progress with rising anxiety. I force myself to breathe, the cold air clearing my mind. What would Carl do? The thought surfaces unbidden, and I can almost see his calm, composed expression. Our massive column crawls across the wilderness, the 100-plus cattle slowing our cavalry to a snail's pace. Charlotte rides in the middle of our column, her anxiety mounting as the cattle force us to a crawl. I force myself to breathe, the cold air clearing my mind. I wonder what Carl would do, picturing his calm, composed expression. I do not waste energy on useless anger. I calculate, seeking the optimal solution even in the worst circumstances. This thought acted like a cold current, extinguishing my inner agitation. Anger changes nothing. Action is required. I reined in my horse and rode to Leon, who was in the center of the column urging soldiers to drive the livestock. "Lord Leon," I said, my voice calm but rapid. "These animals are slowing us down. I request to lead my squad to the rear to guard the army. If I spot the enemy, I will fire a warning shot. Do not hesitate. Abandon the livestock immediately and choose to either fight or flee." Leon was stunned. He hadn't expected me to volunteer for the most dangerous position after our previous disagreements. A mix of surprise and guilt crossed his face as he softened his tone. "Knight Charlotte, just now I raised a hand to stop him." "No need. Arguments aside, I know there can only be one voice on the battlefield. Since you have decided, I will execute my duty as your subordinate. Leave the rear to me. Remember, when you hear the gunshot, make your choice immediately. It is the only way to minimize losses." Leon looked into my eyes and nodded heavily. "I understand. Once I hear the shot, I will order the livestock abandoned and retreat at full speed. You must be careful." Without another word, I turned my horse and ordered my squad. "Slow down. Detach from the main column. We are taking the rear guard." We quickly fell behind, becoming a thin barrier at the end of the bloated, slow-moving formation. Roland rode near me, frowning. "Knight Charlotte, this is too risky. Staying with the slow main force is a bigger risk," I replied, scanning the silent, lethal wasteland. By guarding the rear, we gain time and space. Remember, our mission isn't to block them, but to be the eyes and ears. Warn them, then find a way to retreat. As for those in front, if their commander made a foolish decision, there is nothing we can do. I kept my squad at a precisely calculated distance from the main force and the livestock. This distance ensured my warning shot would be heard while maximizing our reconnaissance range. My expression remained cold and calm, devoid of any emotional fluctuation. There was no anxiety or complaint, only a focused, near-indifferent vigilance. This extreme composure brought a strange sense of security to my men. Roland watched me, his gaze lingering on my face. A thought struck him. I looked exactly like Lord Carl. Especially in moments of crisis, our expressions were identical. When facing imminent disaster, I rarely showed panic or heaviness. Instead, I entered a state of extreme calm, just as I was now. It was as if I already knew what would happen, making panic unnecessary. Like the sea before a storm, I controlled my horse's pace, silently moving at the rear. My eyes swept the horizon and tracked the sun's path. The sun climbed to its zenith and began its inevitable descent. I measured the passage of time with precision. Finally, the sunset stained the clouds in blood red and orange, half the sun sinking behind the black mountain ridge. Shadows lengthened, swallowing the light. Evening had arrived. Just before the night took hold, a faint, rhythmic vibration traveled through the earth. Others hadn't noticed, but I caught it immediately. It wasn't superior hearing. It was because I had rehearsed this moment countless times. The sound of dense hoofbeats, like distant drums, was approaching rapidly. Without hesitation, I raised the flintlock musket I had kept ready on my saddle. The barrel was loaded with powder but no ball, prepared for this signal. I pulled the hammer and fired into the darkening sky. Bang! The sharp report shattered the silence, startling a flock of birds in the distance. The column ahead erupted in commotion. Soldiers and livestock panicked at the sudden noise. Many looked back in confusion, wondering why their rear commander had fired. I lowered the smoking barrel, my eyes fixed on the rising dust in the distance. My voice was cold and clear. The Solonians are here. The hoofbeats grew into a thunderous roar, striking fear into everyone's hearts. They looked back to see a massive cloud of dust rolling across the horizon, a death storm raised by a large cavalry force. I holstered my musket, gripping the reins tightly. My horse snorted, sensing the danger and my own tension. The enemy was less than 3 kilometers away. They would reach us in minutes. I had to decide, run. I could turn my squad away now and retreat toward Conford at full speed. Given the Solen cavalry's habits, they would prioritize the livestock-heavy main force, likely ignoring my 20-man squad. From a purely survivalist perspective, this was the optimal solution. But what then? The daughter of Count Rochefort fleeing in the face of battle? The thought felt like a slap to the face. War is an extension of politics. The stigma of desertion would brand me and stain my father's reputation. I could imagine how the salons of the royal capital would spread the tale. A count's daughter, cowardly, abandoning the elite troops of the northern frontier. If I fled, how would my father face this? And more importantly, what of Conford? Carl had entrusted the command to me. If the Allies were slaughtered while I returned safely, how would he face his subjects? People wouldn't remember Leon's stupidity. They would only remember that Conford's team, luckily, escaped. Malicious rumors would consume everything Carl had built. I could not let his trust and hard work be tarnished by my cowardice. He trusts me. I must be worthy of that trust. In a flash, I made my decision. I waved my hand and shouted, "Follow the main force. Move." I led my squad forward, catching up to the panicked main body. Livestock were stampeding, and soldiers were pale, struggling to maintain control. I rode straight to Leon. Leon had lost his color, but he showed the grit expected of a military noble. He hadn't collapsed. Instead, there was a fierce, desperate resolve in his eyes. "Lord Leon, the Solen cavalry is behind us. At least 300 light cavalry, less than 3 kilometers away. They will reach us in 5 minutes," I reported firmly. Leon took a deep breath and offered a grim, regretful smile. "Knight Charlotte, it is my fault. Greed blinded me. You must take your men and leave. I will bear the consequences." Seeing his resolve and apology, my resentment dissipated. Charlotte shook her head, her tone calm but firm. This is not the time for debate. My men and I refuse to be branded deserters. Leon, give the order. Leon nodded heavily, his resolve set. He drew his sword, galloping before the panicked ranks. His voice, hoarse with desperate madness, cut through the noise. Brothers, look behind us. The Solonians are upon us. We cannot outrun them with this baggage. Let us stand and fight like true Plantagenet soldiers. He pointed his blade toward the rising dust, roaring. The northern frontier is not their playground. If they want our lives, they will pay in blood. Today, we either die here or carve a path to survival. Fight with me. His desperate cry acted as a stimulant, replacing the soldiers' panic with a fierce, lethal intent. The northern soldiers, many having lost families to the Solonians, burned with the fire of vengeance. Charlotte's early warning had bought Leon precious time to organize. Leon issued sharp, decisive orders. First squad, drive the livestock toward the approaching Solonians. Scatter them to disrupt their charge. All cavalry, form up. Now, the soldiers obeyed instantly, finding their backbone. The livestock were driven toward the Solen cavalry, creating a chaotic, moving barrier. Meanwhile, the remaining 100 cavalrymen formed 3 waves. The first wave consisted of 30 elites in heavy cuirasses, armed with lances to act as the spearhead. The following 2 rows comprised 70 light cavalrymen with sabers, ready to exploit the breach. Leon's strategy was simple and brutal. Use the livestock to blunt the enemy's momentum, then meet them with a suicidal lance charge, followed by close-quarters slaughter. He remained wary of Solonian tactics. Charlotte, he called out, take your musket cavalry and guard our flanks. Keep their horse archers at bay. Don't let them break our formation. Understood. Charlotte led her 20 musket cavalry to the flank, prowling like hounds ready to intercept any harassment. A solemn, tragic atmosphere hung over the Plantagenet line. The cuirassiers, gripping their lances, wore expressions of grim hatred. As survivors of the North, they were determined to take a Solonian down with them. Behind them, Thorstein led 300 light cavalry, charging like arrows across the plains. A sharp gunshot echoed ahead, making his heart sink. What is this? He tightened his reins, peering into the dusk. How did they spot us so soon? His foreboding proved correct. Ahead, a massive herd of panicked livestock stampeded toward them, kicking up clouds of dust. Riderless horses, saddles empty, galloped at the front, neighing in terror. Damn it! Slow down. Avoid the center. Thorstein roared. It was a tactical necessity, not mercy. The combined speed of the charge meant a collision with the stampede would crush his own men. Even veteran Solonian cavalry had to yield to this living obstacle. The unit struggled to decelerate and pivot, attempting to bypass the chaotic flood. Several riders were trampled, their screams lost in the thunder of hoofs. Hold steady, Thorstein shouted, struggling to control his mount. He cursed the loss of the livestock. They were his key to redemption. He detached 50 men. Round up as many as you can. Go. Clearing the chaos, Thorstein looked ahead, and his expression darkened. Where the Plantagenets had stood, a cavalry force was now arrayed. 30 heavy lancers stood at the front, their steel tips pointed skyward, adjusting their distance for a countercharge. Behind them, the saber cavalry stood in tight, desperate formation. Fast reactions, ruthless planning, Thorstein realized. They had used the livestock to stall his momentum and were now preparing a countercharge while his formation was fractured. His horse archers could not maneuver effectively while his ranks were scattered. The enemy's morale was high. Hesitation now would be fatal. Retreating would only expose his flanks to their lances. Furthermore, the Solonian iron cavalry held a psychological edge. Having dominated the north, they held the Plantagenets in contempt. His vanguard battalion, composed of desperate men seeking redemption, was inherently aggressive. All units, listen. Thorstein drew his saber. Sheath your bows. Draw blades. Charge. Crush them. He knew he had to break their formation before the lancers reached full speed. He concentrated his few heavy cavalry and armored men at the front to serve as the tip of his spear. The rest followed with sabers and maces, bows slung at their saddles. Their plan: a heavy initial impact to shatter the line, followed by skirmishing and close-quarters combat. Thorstein wasn't just relying on brute force. He turned to his deputy, the scout Ragnar. Grateful for Ragnar's past loyalty, he trusted him with a critical task. "Ragnar," he growled, "don't charge the center. Take 20 of our best riders and flank them. Harass their rear and sides. Don't let them keep their formation." "Understood, boss." Ragnar licked his lips, his eyes glinting with bloodlust as he peeled away with his men. At Thorstein's signal, a low horn blast sounded, and the Solonian cavalry advanced like a pack of wolves. Simultaneously, Ragnar's 20 Skarn horse archers closed in, firing volleys to disrupt the Plantagenet line. Charlotte, ready, saw the threat and shouted, "First gust." An invisible energy pulse radiated from her. Air currents swirled around her, her golden hair lifted, and her perception sharpened as time seemed to slow. This Tier 2 night spell granted her a temporary boost in reaction and speed. She whistled, leading her 20 musket cavalry to intercept the flankers like a shield. Under the effect of first gust, her movements were fluid and her senses acute. Arrows whistled and lead bullets flew. Plantagenet riders fell, while Solonian light cavalry were torn apart by close-range musket fire. The battle turned brutal and chaotic. Charlotte locked eyes with a familiar figure, Ragnar, the officer who had escaped Karl at Icewater Creek. Enemies met, their hatred burning bright. Ragnar spotted Charlotte, recognizing the Plantagenet commander who had ambushed them at Icewater Creek. Fueled by past humiliation, he charged, sneering at the thought of a woman in close-quarters combat, and swung his saber. Charlotte, under the effect of first gust, reacted with unexpected speed. She dodged the blade with fluid grace and drew her bow. She knocked, drew, and released in one motion. The arrow flew like lightning. Ragnar barely saw it coming. He dodged, but the arrow grazed his neck, leaving him cold with the touch of death. Shocked, Ragnar realized her archery was as lethal as her command. Before he could react, Charlotte fired a second shot. It struck his saddle pommel, forcing him to recoil in panic. Humiliated and fearful, he drew his own bow, determined to outmatch her. We circled, exchanging arrows at breakneck speed amidst the chaotic battlefield. Our arrows hissed like vipers in a deadly duel. Charlotte's musketeers, though outmatched, sacrificed themselves to shield her flank. Meanwhile, on the main front, two massive cavalry waves accelerated toward each other. At 400 meters, the Plantagenet soldiers saw the Solonians' grim faces. Seeing their musketeer comrades falling, their resolve hardened. I was not at the very front. As commander, I needed to maintain a vantage point to direct the flow. I controlled the rhythm, shouting, "Accelerate! Trot forward!" At 200 meters, I roared, "Lancers! Level lances!" My 30 cuirassier lancers lowered their 4-meter lances. Adrenaline surging, I drew my pistol and yelled, "Charge!" For Plantagenet. Full speed ahead, we crashed forward like a broken dam, a tide of steel meeting the Solonians. Under the sunset, the two forces collided with thunderous impact. The earth shook under hundreds of hooves, drowning out all sound. Dust and grass filled the air, stained blood-red by the setting sun. The distance vanished. There was no room for evasion. Skill and firearms mattered little now. Only raw courage remained. We poured our will into the charge, our lances set for the kill. The forest of 4-meter lances reflected a chilling light, causing the Solonians to waver. Their horses, sensing the impending slaughter, panicked and broke formation. At 50 meters, my arm trembled with the force of my grip. I locked eyes with a scarred Solonian officer wielding a heavy blade. All tactical thought vanished. I was purely a weapon of war. Kill! Our roar eclipsed the thunder of hooves. We collided. The sound of splintering wood, tearing armor, and dying screams erupted instantly. The front line was a hellscape of broken necks and shattered skulls. Our lancers struck first, though the impact snapped many of our hardwood shafts. Solonians were impaled or flung from their saddles like ragdolls. I focused solely on the officer. I thrust my lance with everything I had. The impact shattered my grip, but the tip found its mark. I felt the lance pierce his flesh. The shaft snapped. The officer flew backward, falling beneath the hooves. A black shadow swung toward my face. A spiked mace. I ducked by instinct. It smashed my helmet, sending it flying. A second later, and I would have been dead. My attacker had no second chance. The momentum of our charge carried us through their lines. The first clash ended. We had the upper hand. Our cuirassier lancers had shattered their front. Over 20 Solonians were down. But the slaughter had only begun. Our saber cavalry slammed into theirs, turning the field into a chaotic melee. Stripped of speed, we fought in a blood-soaked tangle of steel and death. Our numerical disadvantage was becoming fatal. The Solonians outnumbered us nearly 3-1. Despite their heavy losses in the initial charge, their superior numbers allowed them to swarm my men, often surrounding a single Plantagenet rider with 3 or more attackers. My soldiers struggled to parry frontal strikes, while simultaneously fending off spears and maces from their flanks and rear. Many of my brave riders were struck down from blind spots immediately after felling an enemy. Our formation was being crushed, our maneuverability vanished, and our casualties spiked. Yet, the sheer courage and suicidal resolve of my men largely offset our lack of numbers. They seemed to have forgotten fear, refusing to retreat even when faced with overwhelming odds. Several of my men, blinded by bloodlust, roared and abandoned all defense, spurring their horses to ram into the densest clusters of Solonians like living siege hammers. This desperate tactic shattered the Solonian formation, leaving their ranks in chaos as they were trampled by their own panicked mounts. The clash of steel was deafening, a brutal, primitive melee where every second claimed a life. When we finally disengaged, the wasteland was a graveyard of broken bodies, shattered weapons, and discarded armor. Blood soaked the dry earth, filling the air with the sickening stench of iron and ruptured viscera. We and the Solonians drifted apart, struggling to rein in our wounded, terrified horses before turning to face each other once more. My ranks were decimated. Of the original 100, fewer than 60 remained, all wounded. The Solonians had also suffered heavily, with 70 to 80 casualties, far exceeding their expectations. Yet, the psychological state of the two sides was starkly different. My men, despite losing half their strength, were emboldened by a burning desire for vengeance, their grips firm on their blades despite their bleeding wounds. The Solonians, conversely, were gripped by shock and fear, unaccustomed to an enemy that didn't collapse after the first clash. They had never faced such stubborn, suicidal ferocity, and their initial arrogance had curdled into dread. Even the wounded, fallen soldiers refused to yield. They crawled through the gore, clutching daggers, broken shafts, or stones, attacking any enemy within reach. I watched a disemboweled veteran cling to a Solonian's leg until he was run through. Thorstein, witnessing this hellish scene, visibly shuddered. Thorstein had intended to use his light cavalry's mobility to scatter and harass us after the first charge. He had planned to wear us down with horse archery, a tactic that had never failed him before. But as he looked toward my remnants, his expression shifted to one of pure horror. He saw something that left him breathless. He was witnessing the impossible. Just 150 meters away, we hadn't broken. We were reforming with terrifying speed, and over a dozen of my lancers, who should have been spent, still stood. They had gathered at the front, armed with scavenged lances and spears, reforming their formidable wall of steel. At the head of this tiny formation stood the officer Thorstein had failed to kill, me. My helmet was gone, my face was a mask of blood, but my eyes were cold as ice, locked onto him as I gripped a broken lance. They want to charge again? Thorstein croaked, his throat dry. Were we mad? Did we not fear death? He looked at his own men, and his heart sank. He saw only pale, terrified faces. His men's morale had been shattered by our suicidal tenacity. They fought for coin and glory, but we fought to drag them into the grave with us. A lethal disparity in will. Thorstein's mind raced, but he found no escape. To flee now, exposing his back to a charging lancer unit, would be collective suicide. To scatter would only invite a slaughter if we struck their flanks. Only one path remained. He had to muster his remaining courage and charge into our spear tips, hoping to break our crumbling resolve in one final, desperate gamble. Reform, Thorstein roared, his voice cracking with desperation. Solonian warriors, do not fear these dying wretches. They are spent. Follow me, one last charge. Crush them for Chief Herald, he screamed, trying to reignite the cold blood of his men. The remaining Solonians suppressed their terror, raised their bloodied weapons, and prepared for the final, life-or-death struggle. On the wasteland, two broken armies began to accelerate, like wounded beasts lunging for a final, fatal bite. Meanwhile, the duel between my musket cavalry and the Solonian horse archers reached its climax. Both sides were nearly wiped out, with only a few riders left in the dust. Charlotte and Ragnar remained the focus, their mounts heaving, covered in sweat and gore. Charlotte's horse was in a dire state, 3 scarred arrows embedded in its hindquarters, causing it to stumble with every agonizing step. Ragnar noticed, a cruel smile spreading across his face as he drew his bow, aiming not at Charlotte, but at her failing mount. Whoosh! An arrow struck the horse's neck. The loyal beast let out a shrill cry and collapsed, throwing Charlotte forward with tremendous momentum. She rolled to a stop, her helmet lost and golden hair spilling out. As I looked on, I saw Ragnar's eyes gleam with malice. He holstered his bow and drew his saber. He turned his horse, charging toward the struggling Charlotte to deliver the final blow, which I watched with bated breath. Despite the pain, I saw Charlotte's survival instinct kick in instantly. She scrambled for her bow, but it was gone. She spotted a discarded flintlock musket near a fallen soldier, and I watched her reach for it. She lunged for the weapon. Ragnar was closing in fast. The musket was loaded, as I knew. Heart pounding, I watched Charlotte fumble with the unfamiliar firearm. Her movements were clumsy and desperate. She shook powder into the pan, closed the cover, and pulled the heavy hammer back with all her might, as I observed. The delay cost her any chance to dodge, as I realized. Ragnar was upon her, his saber raised to strike as the sunset glinted off the steel, a scene I watched in suspense. Charlotte had no time to aim or steady herself. As the saber descended, I watched her instinctively raise her heavy musket toward the horse's chest and pull the trigger with her eyes closed. Bang! The deafening roar of the musket echoed. I saw the massive recoil slam into her shoulder, sending her reeling backward. This backward stumble saved her life. I watched the saber's tip graze her forehead, severing a few strands of golden hair. Simultaneously, I saw the lead shot from the musket slam into Ragnar's unprotected chest at point-blank range. Ugh! Ragnar groaned, his swing faltering and breaking mid-motion. Struck as if by an invisible hammer, I watched him get knocked off his horse, landing heavily several meters away as his saber clattered to the ground. Charlotte fell, her musket slipping from her hands. I saw her gasp for air, her shoulder throbbing and her ears ringing. She looked up to see Ragnar lying on his back, eyes wide with pain and disbelief. He clutched his chest, but blood gushed through his fingers, staining the earth. His body twitched, and his throat rattled with air. His lungs were punctured. I watched Charlotte observe her near-fatal rival meet his end in such a gruesome manner. The shock of the battle, the exhaustion of survival, and the impact of firing the flintlock musket left her dazed. She sat still, staring at the spreading pool of blood, her fingers trembling as she clutched her aching shoulder. The thunderous roar of the musket pierced the battlefield's chaos like a drumbeat. Every soldier, Plantagenet or Solonian, turned toward the sound, and I witnessed the moment that would decide the skirmish. The surviving Plantagenet cavalry saw Charlotte Rockefort struggling to stand. Her disheveled golden hair fluttered like a banner of victory. Though unsteady, she lived. Meanwhile, I saw Ragnar, commander of the Solen cavalry, lying dying with a shattered chest. After a brief silence, ecstasy and admiration swept through the Plantagenets. Knight Charlotte won. Long live Rockefort. Long live Conford. The Plantagenet cavalry erupted in cheers, their morale surging to its peak. The Solonians, especially those fighting the musket cavalry, witnessed their commander's demise. Their fighting spirit vanished instantly. No longer willing to fight, they fired a few panicked arrows before turning their horses to flee toward their origin. Roland stopped the remaining musket cavalry from pursuing. Their task was complete. The rout of the flank cast a shadow over the main Solen force, who were preparing a second charge. Already fearful of the enemy's suicidal tactics, their resolve wavered. Yet, the horns had sounded, and the horses were galloping. The two forces collided once more, Plantagenet lances against Solonian sabers. But this time, everything was different. The leading Solonians broke the Plantagenet line with desperate ferocity, causing chaos. However, those behind them had lost the courage to continue. Seeing their flank collapse and feeling the enemy's rising morale, their survival instinct overrode their will to fight.